Chapter 41. "What's the matter, doctor?" asked Chen Mo, looking straight. "Remember the advice you gave me before you went to Europe?" The doctor looked at Chen Mo and asked, "Do you mean to improve the super soldier serum to improve the success rate of reinforcement?" Chen Mo remembers that both the original serum before improvement and the enhanced serum injected by him and Steve were not completely successful in animal experiments. Although the body of the tested animals has been successfully strengthened, there is no exception. In the process of the experiment, they all seem to suffer great pain, struggle desperately, lose consciousness, fall into coma, and finally die. The examination after the experiment found that their brains were stimulated too strongly, beyond their endurance limit, resulting in brain death. They analyzed that this is because the strengthening process is too violent for the body transformation, which brings about severe pain. Later experiments also proved this. Therefore, the existing fortified serum has a very high demand on the willpower of the people receiving the reinforcement. Once they can't bear the pain of the reinforcement, they will fall into a coma like the animals in the experiment and eventually die of brain. Therefore, Chen Mo suggested that the doctor should improve the serum to make the strengthening process milder and reduce the pain in the transformation, so as to reduce the need for willpower and improve the success rate of strengthening. Now it seems that the doctor should have succeeded. "Yes, I did research in the direction you said, and found that there is a possibility of improvement. According to some theories you put forward, I did research and experiment again and finally successfully developed the improved serum." Doctor's proud smile. "The animal experiment was perfect and successful. Although there was a violent struggle during the strengthening process, it did not fall into a coma. After the experiment, everything was normal." Looking at the doctor, Chen Mo asked positively, "So you did a human experiment with yourself?" "Yes, I did, didn't I?" The doctor smiled. Chen Mo shakes his head helplessly. In fact, the normal procedure is to use death row inmates or volunteers to carry out the experiment first. After all, there are certain risks in the experiment. Scientists carry out the experiment by themselves. Once it fails, the whole project will end. But the doctor is too kind. If it had not been for the orders of his superiors and the precedent of Red Skull's success, he would not have let Steve carry out the experiment. "Doctor, I hope it doesn't happen again," Chen Mo said with a serious face. "You are the core of the whole super soldier plan and also the most important core member of our SHIELD Bureau. In case of an accident, the consequences are unimaginable." Instead of being angry at Chen Mo's attitude, the doctor smiled softly. "Yes, my commander." Howard's eyes flashed up. "Doctor, can I also accept reinforcement?" Howard said. His saliva was almost pouring out. Thinking of Chen Moqiang's great physical quality, Howard would like to strengthen it now. Then he turned over to the serf to sing and return all the bullying in Chen Mu. The thought of Howard looking at Chen Mo here is a little eager. "Yes, but I forgot to say just now that the improved serum has improved the strengthening process, so the strengthening effect is much weaker than that of the original and the enhanced serum. After the strengthening, the physical quality is about 3 times of that of the normal people. The advantage is that there is no need for the radiation of life rays. As long as sufficient nutrition is added, the direct injection of serum can complete the strengthening." Howard was discouraged when he heard this and thought again that even if Steve had been strengthened by the fortified serum, he was not Chen Mo's opponent. He still had no dream. He would not want to turn over in his life. Feeling Chen Mo's cruel eyes, Howard wanted to cry without tears. At this time, the doctor suddenly said, "Besides, I did a special research on the issues of longevity and body freezing that you mentioned to me. After serum strengthening, the body has very strong cell activity. After freezing, the body's metabolism tends to stagnate, but after thawing, the cell can recover its activity quickly. During this period, life is almost static. That is to say, The idea you put forward to stop aging the body through freezing is feasible. In addition, I really ignored the issue of life expectancy before. Serum not only strengthens the body, but also enhances the vitality of cells, and the aging speed of cells is greatly delayed. You and Steve were the only ones who successfully received the enhancement, which could not be used as a reference at all. After the success of the improved serum, I specially carried out animal experiments. The results showed that the lifespan of the animals strengthened by the serum was indeed greatly prolonged. The changes that have taken place in me have proved that. Howard hears the words, and he has spirit again. Then what are we waiting for? Doctor, strengthen me now. The enhancement process of the improved serum was very smooth. Although Howard was crying in the middle, he successfully completed the enhancement. From the chair, Howard felt the changes of his body. The original lack of exercise seems to be full of endless strength. With a fist, it brings a burst of breaking wind. Howard was so excited that he took off tentatively again. He jumped up to 2 meters high. He almost fell to the ground when he fell. Howard, with a happy face, can't wait to run to the mirror to see if he has become as tall and strong as Chen Mo and Steve. Obviously, he was disappointed by the results. Although the improved serum has the same effect, it can achieve 3 times the physical quality of ordinary people after strengthening, and it is very powerful in strength, agility, endurance, and other aspects. But maybe because we haven't broken through the limit of human body, the change of body is not too big. From the appearance, it's just a little stronger than before, but not as great as Steve. Seeing Howard's disappointment, Dr. Erskine smiled and stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. "Didn't you find out?" Howard didn't respond. "What do you find?" The doctor pointed to his brain. Howard felt it with his heart, and the color of surprise bloomed in his eyes. "My God, my brain, thinking too fast, and my memory. God, it feels great." Looking at Howard shouting excitedly, Chen Mo can't help turning his white eyes. "It's hopeless." Dr. Higgins just smiled. He just strengthened his success and felt the great improvement in brain thinking, analysis, and memory. He did not perform much better than Howard. "We should all thank you," the doctor said to Chen Mo seriously. Seeing Chen Mo's mouth open, the doctor waves and interrupts him. "In my opinion, the value of the improved serum is unlimited, and it allows us ordinary people to accept reinforcement. In addition to the enhancement of physical quality and the prolongation of lifespan, the most important thing is that it strengthens the brain and brings great help to our scientific research. During this period of time, many problems that have puzzled me for a long time have been solved one by one. All experiments and researches have become handy, and everything seems to be very simple. You know what it means to a scientist and to the world." Chen Mo nodded at his words. Chapter 42. An excellent scientist has a super brain, just like a game with plug-in. The difficulty of research is greatly reduced, followed by the emergence of a large number of achievements, bringing major changes in science and technology and the great progress of the whole world. So thank you to me, to the shield, to the world. Chen Mo blushed a little when he was told by the doctor, "Doctor, don't say that. It's all your own credit. You invented the serum. I just made a suggestion. Without you, there would be no fortified serum, not to mention today's improved serum. Maybe even myself would have been killed by the spy of Hydra." Dr. Erskine lamented that if it wasn't for Chen's reminders and suggestions of feigning death, the sudden appearance of spies in that experiment would have killed him. Doctor just saw Howard's strengthened changes and thought of himself. He was excited. Chen Mo can't bear it. He does things by his own heart. Although all he does is good for the doctors, it's more for himself. The doctor suddenly said that he was so great, and he felt a little uncomfortable. "Howard is still intoxicated. Go ahead and take him." "Doctor, let's go back first and come another day." Doctor in the back helplessly shook his head. The corner of his mouth cannot help showing a gentle smile. Howard, who was dragged away by Chen Mo, was still trying to struggle, but he was easily suppressed by Chen Mo's overwhelming power, so he had to give up resistance in desperation, and obediently followed Chen Mo back to the martial arts school. After that, he simply stayed in the martial arts school and pestered Chen Mo to teach him fighting skills every day. According to Dr. Marklane, the research of Edelman alloy is likely to produce results in a short period of time. At this time, the European war situation is in a stalemate, and the rebellious Hydra base has no new action for the time being. Chen Mo is not in a hurry to return to Europe, waiting for the news of the laboratory and the martial arts school. Chen Mo finally came back to be quiet for a few days. He couldn't stand his entanglement, so he began to teach him as he wanted. Despite his 3 times strong physical fitness, Howard still suffered a lot in Chen Mo's hands. His face and nose were bruised every day. Thanks to his strong recovery ability, he became alive again the next day. After the brain is strengthened, Howard can learn a few moves quickly and gradually in Chen Mo's hands. Of course, in the case of Chen Mo's hands, if he is fighting for life and death, he can't escape being killed by Chen Mo. On the other hand, Dr. Marklane's research is progressing very well. In the absence of gold, we can independently develop the alpha alloy whose performance is far superior to the existing alloy. There is no doubt about the ability of Dr. With sufficient raw materials, the research and development speed of Edelman alloy exceeded Chen Mo's expectation. Although the original Edelman alloy, the shield material used by Chen Mo, has not been successfully reproduced, Dr. Chen still created a super alloy with slightly lower performance than the original Edelman alloy, but the same hardness is beyond imagination and indestructible. That is, the most well-known real Alderman alloy in Marvel world. Although he was abused every day, Howard, wearing sunglasses and panda eyes, came to the underground secret laboratory again just a few days later. As like as 2 peas of Chen's shield, the bright silver metal shield was placed in front of the 2 men. Looking at the familiar round shield in front of them, Chen Mo and Howard looked at each other. They couldn't help but think of the round shield hanging all over the room in Dr. Marklane's living room. Chen did not know what to say about the doctor's hobby of making precious materials into shields. Like the original alloy, the alloy has a common characteristic. They initially remain liquid at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit and can be processed at will. Once they solidify, they will become indestructible. Even at 500,000 degrees Celsius, they will not melt at all. Therefore, once the alloy is formed, it can no longer change its shape or be damaged by any external force. It has the same indestructible properties as the original alloy. This Edelman alloy was once again made into a round shield by Dr. Marklane, which can only be used as a shield and can't be used again. But it's just the right way to give this shield to Steve. He took the original Edelman alloy shield that should belong to him and had to find another weapon for him. Although this shield made of real Edelman alloy is slightly worse than the one in my hand and does not have the ability to absorb kinetic energy and make all attacks invalid, its hard material and indestructible characteristics are enough to resist all current attacks and use it. After all, there is no too powerful enemy in the world. Once Steve has the Edelman alloy shield, he is basically invincible. There is no threat to him except for the devastating attacks such as nuclear explosion. Not to mention the 2 people's condemnation of Dr. Marklane's violent behavior of suffering from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. After a number of tests, Edelman alloy showed not less than the super performance of the original Edelman alloy, which made Chen Mo very satisfied. He did not expect that the real Edelman alloy could be developed so quickly. Because the hardness of Edelman alloy has exceeded the limit of instrument measurement, the inventor of hardness measuring instrument can't do anything about it at all, so Dr. simply and roughly conducted the real bullet defense test directly. knives, guns, grenades, and rockets when a battle in turns. All kinds of cold weapons and large-caliber machine gun bullets can't damage it at all. The marks left on the surface after being hit by the bullet disappeared with one touch of the hand. The surface of the shield is still as bright as new, and there is no trace of scratch left. The short-range detonation of the grenade and the bombing of the rocket only blackened its surface, and the shield did not deform at all. Dr. Marklane has basically tried all the weapons that can be found in the laboratory. This Edelman shield has perfectly withstood all the attacks, and it is still intact. But for the lack of tanks in the underground lab, Dr. Wang even plans to use an armor-piercing bullet to test one. However, Chen Mo has no doubt that even in the face of armor-piercing bullets, Edelman alloy shield can still be easily taken down. You should know that Edelman alloy is the strongest metal that cannot be destroyed even by nuclear explosion. But it's different from Chen Mo's shield. Compared with Chen Mo's only original Edelman shield in the world, Edelman is not much weaker in hardness and self-defense. Chapter 43. The only difference is that the real Alderman alloy does not have the ability to absorb the kinetic energy of the original Alderman alloy, making all attacks ineffective, and cannot be as hard as in the film of Avengers Alliance, and survive the attack of Thunderbolt Hammer. If the attack is too strong, although the alloy itself can resist the attack, the strength carried by the attack will be transmitted. As a result, people behind the alloy will be hit by the powerful force to fly, or be injured by the earthquake. Nevertheless, Edelman alloy is strong enough. Most of the attacks on the battlefield are safe enough to deal with. Even the short-range explosion and artillery attack can't do much damage to the powerful body strengthened by serum under the protection of Edelman alloy. Doctor, we have seen the defense ability of Edelman alloy, which is indestructible. Is it time to test the attack power? Chen Mo asked Dr. Marklane, who was still struggling to get a tank. When the doctor heard the words, he was stunned. Attack power. As long as the strength is strong enough, the shield can be thrown out to explode the tank. Chen Mo and Howard look at each other helplessly. Dr. Marklane is too poisoned. Chen Mo doubts that if they don't stop him, he will make all the gold vibrators into round shields and hang them on the walls of the laboratory. The shield I designed has a perfect aerodynamic shape. It can move in the air with minimum wind resistance, and it can ensure that the throwing route will not deviate. This Edelman shield has super hardness and toughness, and its natural concentric stiffness makes it a perfect missile. It will only lose the minimum angular momentum if it contacts with a solid object. After a long-term training, the user can throw the shield out of the target, or control the shield to return to the user after multiple rebounds. Listening to the doctor's endless explanation, Chen Mo felt a big head for a while. Now he can conclude that the doctor really intends to make all the alloys into shields. Imagine a group of Special Forces soldiers carrying their shields to rush forward to the peak. Chen Mo shakes his head. He must be stopped. Chen Mo glanced aside at Howard, who was rolling his white eyes behind his sunglasses, reached into his arms and slowly pulled out. A double-handed knight sword with cold light appeared in Chen Mo's hand. At the same time, the doctor, who is still talking, and Howard, who is looking up at the sky, are attracted by the cold light of the blade. They turn around, and then their faces become dull. Isn't this the magical long sword you captured from Hydra Base? Howard's face was ghostly. Where did you get it? Howard looked up and down at Chen Mo as he asked, trying to find out where he had come from. On you, Chen Mo said casually. Impossible, I didn't find you with such a long sword all the way. Howard doesn't believe it at all. It's called hiding swordsmanship. You don't understand it even if you say it. Chen Mo takes out the spirit of fooling the fool and then stops talking to him. Instead, he goes to Dr. Marklane with a sword. Hiding swordsmanship. Is it magic Chinese kung fu again? Howard believed it. He talked to himself. Looking up, he suddenly found that Chen Mo was walking to the doctor with a sword. He thought of the scene where Chen Mo was angry and chased by him with a sword. He couldn't help but lose his face and ran up to stop Chen Mo. "Don't be impulsive. The doctor is a bit nagging and his ideas are quite wonderful, but you can't cut him," Howard advised, then reached for the sword. "Come on, give me the sword. We have something to say." At the moment when his hand was about to touch the hilt, a strong force suddenly came and Howard was kicked away by Chen Mo. Regardless of Howard's broken sunglasses, Chen Mo hands the sword to Dr. Marklane with a sad look on the face of a panda's eye. From the moment when Chen Mo took out the long sword, the doctor was attracted to all the sights. Taking over the long sword from Chen Mo, it was obviously heavier than steel, which made the doctor's arm sink and almost missed it. At the same time, his heart couldn't help jumping. The doctor who has studied metal for half his life can decide. The material of the sword is absolutely unusual. Even when I began to look carefully, the style, pattern, hand guard, and counterweight, the more I looked at the doctor's eyes, the brighter his face became red, and his sword-holding hands were slightly shaking. "Here is this the sword." The doctor looked at Chen Mo and looked forward. Chen Mo nodded. The doctor stroked and knocked for a while, then suddenly turned around and walked to the machine gun for testing. Chen Mo didn't stop him. The doctor went to the machine gun, raised his long sword with both hands and cut towards the barrel with great force. Like a hot knife cutting butter, the whole barrel was cut easily without any block, almost without any sound. Tinkle. The broken barrel fell to the ground with a smooth cut like a mirror. That's right. It must be the legendary sword. Looking at Dr. Marklane, who was in madness with his sword in his arms, Howard approached Chen Mo jealously. "Why can the doctor touch it? I can't touch it." Since Chen Mo used the sword under the pretext of seizing it from Hydra Base, Howard had no less ideas about it, and had seen its all-around ability with his own eyes, and could not get a hand to study how to be willing. It's a pity that Chen Mogan didn't let him touch it, but he couldn't beat it again. He could only stare at Gan. If he has nothing to do with it, he often pesters Chen Mo to come. He's tired of being pestered. Chen Mo stares at his eyes and pulls out the sword, and he runs away. Howard has a deep resentment against Chen Mo. "He robbed my precious shield. He didn't want to borrow your sword to study it. He drew it to frighten me." Although he didn't really cut it, the sharp point of the sword passed through the back neck with a chilling air. The cut tie slipped from the front of his chest. That's not a good feeling. Howard said his small heart couldn't bear his own tie. "What's more, we can't afford to lose. Although I know you are good at swordsmanship, it's frightening." In the face of Howard's jealousy and unwilling questions, Chen Mo mercilessly countered. "Doctor can make Edelman alloy, can you? The doctor can see the origin of the sword at a glance, can you?" Howard was in a jam. "I don't forget your shield is from me. Why don't you show me your sword? You seem to forget that the shield was also made by the doctor." But Chen Mo, Howard simply gave up and turned angrily to the doctor. "Doctor, do you know this sword?" Dr. Marklane nodded gravely. "Well, if I'm right, this sword should be the last sword of King Arthur, the sword of the king." As an enthusiast of cold weapons in the Middle Ages, Dr. Marklane has made a deep research on those legendary weapons. He has 90% assurance that this sword is a broken steel sword. Howard's eyes flashed, hoping to snatch the sword from the doctor's hands, but under Chen's murderous eyes, he wisely chose to give up. "Doctor, what do you think of making a king's sword out of Edelman alloy?" Chen Mo asked in an induced way. The doctor's eyes brightened at hearing the words. Trapped in obsessive-compulsive disorder, cold weapon lovers are finally split by Chen Mo's legendary weapons. Chapter 44. Yes, how could I not have thought of it? With the super performance of Alderman alloy, the weapons produced must be extremely powerful, even not inferior to those legendary weapons. Aiden alloy sword with shield, 1 attack and 1 defense, perfect. When Dr. Marklane finished, he ran into the laboratory with a long sword and was ready to make an Edelman alloy sword after the king's sword. Chen Mo and Howard look at each other and feel relieved. It didn't take too long to make the long sword. All kinds of equipment in the laboratory were very complete. Doctor soon made a new set of mold with King's sword and poured the reconfigured liquid Edelman alloy into the mold. After cooling, the steaming mold was slowly opened, and a two-handed knight sword with charming silver light appeared in front of them. Dr. Marklane took out the sword with his eyes intoxicated, as if appreciating the most perfect work of art completed by himself, and stroked it carefully. The sword is as like as two peas in the form of a king's sword, but because of the different materials, there are many differences between them. The meteorite used to make the king's sword is of great density and unknown material. The whole sword is very heavy, weighing more than 10 kilograms, but the weight of Edelman alloy is similar to that of ordinary steel. The sword made of it is much lighter than Chen Mo's king's sword. Dr. Marklane can pick it up easily. Moreover, the king's sword gives people a cold and pressing feeling. The light on the blade is so sharp that it seems to be able to cut off all obstacles, but Edelman alloy does not. After getting the Edelman alloy sword, the doctor appreciated it and couldn't wait to come to the machine gun that was cut off again. Only a few kilograms long sword was lifted by the doctor. The same sword was cut off and the rest of the barrel was cut off again. The incision was also smooth, but there was something different about the doctor. No. Chen's eyes clearly found the doctor's abnormality and heard what the doctor said. "What's the matter, doctor?" The doctor, frowning and contemplating, hears the words and looks at Chen Mo. "I can't say. Although both swords can easily cut off the barrel of the gun, I feel that there are still some differences, but I can't say specifically." Speaking of this, the doctor suddenly saw the light in front of him and handed the Edelman alloy sword to Chen Mo. "I almost forgot. You are an expert in this field. You have a try." Chen Mo took the long sword, which was indeed much lighter than his king's sword. He waved the machine gun gently to the ground, and the only part of the barrel was easily cut off. Only when the sword passed through the barrel, Chen Mo felt a little resistance. In the sword of the king, Chen Mo felt more comfortable because of the heavy weight. Now, he directly cut into the gun body, and the sword flashed. The whole machine gun was sliced flat and completely turned into a pile of scrap iron. Feeling the feeling of cutting off the machine gun just now, Chen Mo found that he had looked down on the legendary holy sword before. Originally, it was just that it was very tough and sharp. It was invincible in the battle. Even the gun barrel of the tank could be easily cut off, which should not be inferior to the legendary Edelman alloy. Now, with a real contrast, Chen found that this sword is extraordinary. Unlike the Edelman alloy long sword, which can feel slight resistance when cutting the barrel, Chen Mo did not feel any obstruction when the king's sword crossed the gun body, as if it was not the gun body but the air. Tell the doctor how he felt. The doctor was very interested and went back to the laboratory with two swords. After careful examination and research, the doctor finally found out the secret of the king's sword. Worthy of the legendary sword. "I thought the Edelman alloy I invented could be regarded as the strongest metal, but I didn't think there was any more magical existence." Dr. Marklane couldn't help sighing. It turns out that the sword of the king has another hidden attribute. When the blade is waved at high speed, a special ion layer with high-frequency oscillation will be generated on the surface of the blade. When cutting the object, the molecular structure at the contact position of the object will be destroyed instantly, so that it can be easily cut, and the existence of resistance will not be felt at all. Dr. Chen even made a special Edelman alloy plate, which was tested by Chen Mo himself with his consent. As for the fear of damage to the sword, it is totally unnecessary. According to the doctor's test, the hardness of the sword of the king is not weaker than that of Edelman alloy. Even if it can't be cut, it will only spring open without any damage. Chen Mo looks at the fixed Alderman alloy plate and cuts with his sword in both hands. Different from the previous cutting machine gun without resistance, when the long sword touches the alloy plate, Chenmo can clearly feel the blocking feeling from the blade. Nevertheless, Aiden alloy is cut in by the blade with a harsh, stabbing sound. It is cut into two parts by the long sword. Although the atomic structure of Edelman alloy is very stable, it can't resist the high-frequency ion damage on the surface of the blade, which reminds Chenmo of the severed Edelman alloy claw blade in Wolverine 2. Here, Howard on one side was stunned to see that, just in his mind, the indestructible Edelman alloy was cut off by the sword of the Silent King. Dr. Makelane, who should have felt lost, was excited and stared at Chenmo's sword with red eyes. The sword of the king, it is said to be made in Avalon, the land of elves. Its blade is as hard as mud, and it will shine more brightly than the sun. After the sword in the stone was broken, King Arthur got it from the goddess in the lake under the guidance of the magician Merlin. I don't know how many of the legendary things are true, but I feel that there are many secrets on it that haven't been discovered. Speaking of this, the doctor looked at Chenmo eagerly. Can I study this sword for a while? Howard, who was next to him, came back from the astonishment of the amputation of Edelman alloy. Hearing the doctor's request, he had an expression that was impossible at all. He could know how precious Chenmo was to the sword. He could not even touch it. He was so mean that he could not let the doctor study it. Chenmo's reaction was more than he expected. Yes. Chenmo nodded and agreed to the doctor's request. I have a feeling, too, that it's not as simple as we see it. Chenmo gently stroked the body of the sword and said slowly. Looking at Howard's face, Chenmo sneered. The reason why he refused to let Howard touch it was because he knew that Howard was just out of curiosity, and to study it was just to satisfy his curiosity. Chenmo doesn't want his favorite weapon to be used by Howard to cut fruit. However, Dr. Makelane is different. Not to mention his knowledge and love of medieval weapons, Chenmo is relieved to give him the sword of the king. Chapter 45. Most importantly, the master of metal materials by the doctor who created the Edelman alloy may be inspired to develop a new super alloy, which is more meaningful than being taken by Howard to play. Chenmo can promise that Dr. Makelane is very happy. He is very clear about the value of King's sword, not to mention its sharp, tenacious, iron like mud and hidden strong attributes. The identity of King Arthur's holy sword in the legend is priceless. I believe that countless rich and noble people, especially the British royal family, are willing to pay a huge price to get it. Don't worry, it won't be too long. At most 1 week later, I promise to return the king's sword to you intact. The doctor assured me solemnly. Nodded, Chenmo took out a drawing from his arms. Doctor, have time to make these things for me. The doctor turned over the drawing. This is, Howard's curious probe came up. Isn't this your bulletproof armor? But it's a little different. Chenmo nodded. Yes, I have made some improvements according to the characteristics of Edelman alloy. The overall thickness of armor has been reduced a lot. I have also optimized the armor design of joints and other moving parts, which is more flexible than before and does not hinder the movement at all. After carefully reading the drawings, Dr. Makelane looked at Chenmo with admiration. It's a perfect design. More than 100 armor plates are cleverly combined to provide all-round defense without affecting activities. There are ready-made drawings which can be made quickly. I promise to make them for you in a week. Chenmo and Howard go back to the martial arts school and continue to live a leisurely life. From time to time, the practical teaching abuses Howard, and the life is very interesting. Soon, a week later, Chenmo came to the underground laboratory again, and he was still followed by Howard wearing sunglasses, just a pair of panda eyes after the sunglasses. When he came to Dr. Maklane's laboratory, the busy doctor pointed to the corner of his finger and signaled to Chenmo to go first. On the shelf in the corner is a set of eye-catching black combat clothes, and the king's sword is also set aside. According to the drawings provided by Chenmo, The doctor made hundreds of alloy armor of different shapes with the alloy of Edelman. The Edelman armor is painted black and inlaid in the battle suit made of the latest elastic bulletproof material. The slightly raised hard armor is like muscle pieces, which fit on the battle suit. Chen Mo directly put on the combat suit, gently moved twice, and felt it carefully. The combat suit itself is very elastic and comfortable to wear. The armor designed in accordance with Chen Mo's figure perfectly fits the curve of body muscles. Even in sports, it will not have any obstacles and discomfort. In view of the strong defense of Edelman alloy, Chen Mo reduced the thickness of the armor plate, and the overall weight was much lighter than the original bulletproof steel plate, which had no impact on Chen Mo at all. There is a small gap in the joint between the armor, which ensures the defense without affecting the flexibility. Originally, the strong muscles were covered with a layer of streamlined hard alloy armor, like a layer of hard muscles, which protected all the vital and important parts except the head, and filled the body with a sense of science fiction. With Chen Mo's cold face, it has a strong sense of oppression and deterrence. Howard's eyes were hot. Behind the sunglasses, a pair of black panda's eyes stared at Chen Mo's armored combat suit, and his saliva almost flowed. Ignoring Howard's hot eyes, Chen Mo picked up a separate alloy armor mask on the shelf. In fact, the mask is more like a helmet. It completely wraps Chen Mo's head and neck, only showing a pair of sharp eyes. The lower part of the mask is connected with the armor on the body, like a hole. The ingenious armor design of the neck ensures the flexibility of the head rotation. All of a sudden, Chen Mo's head, chest, abdomen, back, arms, thighs, calves, knees, even hands and feet, and every part of his body was covered with dark armor. The smooth black armor surface reflected cold light under the light, and the whole man was like a murderous steel war machine. The doctor on the other side finally finished his work and came over. Perfect design. This is a work of art. Dr. Marklane couldn't help admiring Chen Mo's appearance in his alloy armor suit. Although this armored combat suit was made by him, according to Chen Mo's design drawings, it was another feeling to wear it on Chen Mo at this time. Chen Mo's stature is tall and strong, streamlined muscles are solid and powerful, and the whole body presents a perfect golden proportion. Wearing the alloy armor battle suit tailored to his stature, the whole body seems to be full of extremely powerful force, looks powerful, and has great visual impact under the dark armor. Chen Mo is also very satisfied with this alloy armor combat suit. With it, his survival ability has been improved a lot. Chen Mo is confident to deal with the battle on the battlefield or the crash after returning to the real world. Take off the mask, Chen Mo nodded to the doctor with satisfaction. It's perfect, hard doctor. The doctor smiled and waved. Don't be polite to me. With a smile, Chen Mo picked up the long sword beside him. The dark armor was matched with the silver sword, which was powerful and handsome. How's the research? What's the harvest? The harvest is not small, which is very enlightening for my next research, but unfortunately no more secrets have been found, said the doctor with some regret. Don't worry, if there is a secret it will be found sooner or later, it should be a surprise. Chen Mo smiles quietly. The doctor smiled and said, "Ha ha, you're right, it might be a big surprise." Are you sure you want to do this? In the test field of the underground laboratory, Howard, wearing sunglasses, touches the cold and ferocious heavy machine gun in front of him. He looks at Chen Mo in front of the gun mouth with a little twitch. He is covered with cool black armor. He is uncertain. With the new Aiden alloy armor battle suit, Chen Mo naturally wants to try its defensive power. If there were no machine guns in the laboratory, he would not choose this 12.7 heavy machine gun. With his understanding of Aiden alloy and the alloy armor designed by himself, it is no problem to block the bullets safely. He mainly wants to feel the feeling after being shot and test it. Let's see how the armor cushions kinetic energy. In the face of Howard's uneasy inquiry, Chen Mo, wrapped in bright black alloy armor, nodded slowly, and a low voice came from the armor. "Let's go," confirmed by Chen Mo. Howard swallowed and slowly pulled the trigger with his fingers. Chapter 46. Looking up at Chen Mo, he found that he was still standing in place, motionless, and didn't mean to stop. Finally, he was cruel and pulled the trigger with his teeth clenched. Duh, click, ta. The rapid and loud gunfire rang out, and the dense bullets rushed out of the muzzle of the gun with the light of fire, and immediately hit Chen Mo's chest. The continuous bullets hit a piece of sparks on Chen Mo's body, but it can only make Chen Mo's body slightly vibrate, but his feet have not moved a minute. Only the sound of ding-dong's bullets hitting the alloy armor keeps ringing. When the gunfire stopped, Chen Mo, wearing an alloy armor combat suit, stood still in his original position. On the ground in front of him, there were a lot of deformed bullets falling down, and his armor was not damaged except for a little paint, revealing the silver alloy surface below. Howard, who finished the bullet, stared at the figure standing steadily in front of him. It's hard to imagine that Chen Mo, wearing alloy armor, was completely okay under the continuous hit of 12.7 heavy machine gun bullet, which was enough to break people's body in two. You know, even if the alloy can block the bullet, the huge kinetic energy carried by the bullet will still be transmitted to the body, and its power is not much weaker than the penetration of a simple bullet. In fact, this is exactly what Chen Mo wants to test. Obviously, the result is successful. When the bullet hits the Edelman armor, the bullet cup armor blocks it, and the kinetic energy it carries is dispersed to the whole armor plate, and then acts on the muscles that perfectly fit the armor. Chen Mo's armor is carefully designed according to his body data, which perfectly disperses the impact. After being strengthened, Chen Mo has 6 times the strength of the bones and muscles of ordinary people. It's not a problem to bear the impact after being dispersed. So at the moment when the bullet hits, Chen Mo only feels a shock of the armor at the bullet site. A force is transmitted, and then it's absorbed by the solid muscles. He doesn't even feel the pain. It has to be said that the perfect design of alloy armor combined with the indestructible Edelman alloy makes the armor battle suit defense effect very amazing. Chen Mo is very satisfied with the test effect. The 12.7 heavy machine gun bullet that can break through a centimeter-thick steel plate is almost the most powerful single weapon. The famous Barrett heavy sniper rifle also uses 12.7 bullet. In addition to the speed and accuracy, the power of the two is almost the same. The following grenades did not shake Chen silent under the protection of armor. Although the explosion effect is stronger, the impact force per unit area is far less than that of heavy machine gun bullets when the explosive shrapnel and flame are completely blocked by armor. With this armor, Chen Mo can basically ignore all current individual weapon attacks. Even if it's a shell, Chen Mo estimates that hard resistance is not a big problem. At most, it will be shocked by the impact force, but there will be no life danger. Of course, if you can lock and hit him, it's impossible to achieve this with Chen Mo's super keen perception. That's tough. You're a human tank now. Howard's Black Panda's eyes sparkled with stars, and his tone was full of admiration and envy. Would you like to try? Chen Mo takes off his armor mask and looks at Howard with shining eyes. He asks with a smile. When Howard heard the words, he was very happy. As soon as he wanted to nod, he listened to Chen Mo. We haven't tried the rocket launcher yet. Howard quickly shook his head and said rightfully, No need, I'm a scientist. By the way, your armor is peeling off. Take it off quickly. I'll mend it for you. From the underground laboratory, Chen and Mo returned to the martial arts school. Edelman's armor was directly put into his suit. It just looked stronger outside. No one expected that there would be a magic suit that could withstand the shells and explosions inside. In addition to the alloy armor battle suit, Chen Mo also took the shield made of Edelman alloy and the imitation king's sword. In addition, There are 10 improved serum prepared by Dr. Erskine, but the most valuable one is the two groups of formulas in his mind. Super Soldier Serum and Edelman Alloy Complete Formula and Formula. That is to say, even if Chen Mo returns to the real world, he can make his own Super Soldier Serum, which will play a very important role in his future power construction in the real world. It can be said that Chen Mo has a strong base card. The formula of Edelman Alloy is also of great significance. As long as he carries enough gold back to the real world, Chen Mo can synthesize Edelman Alloy according to the formula, so as to make the weapons and equipment he wants at any time. After all, once the alloy is formed, it cannot be processed again. If you want to make new equipment with the alloy, mastering the alloy formula is an essential prerequisite. After all kinds of things, Dr. Erskine trusted Chen Mo very much. As he said, without Chen Mo, he would have died in the hands of a Hydra spy, let alone created enhanced and improved serum. Therefore, the doctor gave Chen Mo the complete formula and formula of all three kinds of Super Soldier Serum together with 10 groups of serum. And Dr. Makelane, not to mention, Chen Mo was his boss, recruited him, and provided him with a large amount of gold that he could not imagine, which enabled him to successfully develop the Edelman alloy in a short time. To give the research results to the boss, Dr. Makelane took it for granted that people have provided you with so many precious resources for research. If you don't hand in the results, do you want to be chased and chopped by the boss with the sword of the king? It's not only Edelman alloy. Dr. Makelane has no secret. Even when he didn't have gold vibrating material before, the formula of alpha alloy, developed by himself with conventional materials, was also handed to Chen Mo. What does the formula do for him? As long as the boss is happy, it is better to prepare more money for his experiment than anything else. Dr. Makelane was inspired by Chen Mo's Sword of the King and found a new research direction. After giving Chen Mo the formula, he only asked Chen Mo to provide him with more vibration gold, and he once again focused on the new experiment. Although Chen Mo had the alloy formula, he still didn't let the doctor go. Before leaving the lab, Chen Mo gave the doctor 2 more drawings, one of which was the drawing of the throwing knife he used. Chen Mo believed that the throwing knife made of Edelman alloy was definitely more powerful in his hands than the armor-piercing bullet, and it was not a problem to shoot through the tank armor. Another set of drawings is an armored combat suit designed according to Steve's figure. Chen Mo plans to surprise his Captain America apprentice who is still a star. Howard is very jealous of Chen Mo's luxury. He knows the value of Zhenjin. Even the chairman of Stark Industries, the largest arms dealer in the United States, is not willing to use it so extravagantly. Chapter 47. But Chen Mo is for fighting. He is the commander of the Special Forces. Steve is also an important fighter of the Shield Bureau in the future. Howard has no choice but to be jealous. Who makes him not a fighter? He can't use such a suit of equipment for the scientist in charge of logistics, technology, and equipment support. Is it difficult to do experiments in an alloy armored combat suit? The reason is that the experiment is too dangerous to prevent explosion. He is not studying bombs. If he dare to give this reason, Chen Mo will definitely let him know what is real danger. Howard didn't think about joining the Special Forces, but it's okay to let him fight with Chen Mo occasionally. It makes him fight with the enemy every day in the battlefield under the gun. He would rather stay in the laboratory and study his black technology. Chen Mo doesn't feel much about it. With the power of Hydra, money is just a number for him, and these Zhenjin are just rare materials for him. He had already asked Hydra to secretly collect vibration gold. According to the doctor's formula, after it was made into Edelman alloy, it was enough to build a chariot. Therefore, Chen Mo, as the rich man and the big boss behind the scenes, had the courage to use the vibration gold that Howard thought was precious and incomparable at will. The composition proportion of Edelman alloy is quite different from that of the original alloy used for Chenmo's shield. Although we don't know the specific proportion of the original Edelman alloy, it is only 1/3 of the weight of ordinary steel, which indicates that the gold content in the alloy is very high. But Edelman alloy is different. Its weight is similar to that of steel. According to Dr. Chenmo's formula, the content of Zhenjin is less than 10%. That is to say, dozens of kilograms of vibrating gold in the secret laboratory can produce several tons of Edelman alloy, which is enough for Chenmo to spend, let alone Hydra. With its powerful power all over the world, Chenmo will only collect more vibrating gold. The idea of building a chariot is not just to say that he really intends to make a super chariot for himself with Edelman alloy. I don't know if Howard will spit blood when he knows it. In a few days, the new alloy armor battle suit and 20 throwing knives Chenmo asked for were ready. Chenmo and Howard should also return to Europe. Before leaving, Chenmo summoned all the members of the martial arts school. After this time, Chenmo is not going to come back. After dealing with the problem of Hydra, Chenmo plans to return to the real world directly. All the people in the martial arts school should make arrangements. There is no problem with the loyalty of several people. Chenmo will not ignore them naturally. Looking at several people standing quietly in front of him, Chenmo slowly opens his mouth. "You've been with me for a long time, and I've been looking at your performance. I will not come back for a long time after I leave New York this time. You can choose to go to Europe with me, or stay here to manage the martial arts school and the underground forces in Brooklyn for me. Of course, neither of these two options will bring peace or even danger. Fighting and killing will become the norm. So if anyone doesn't want to live this life and wants to leave, I can also give him a lot of money, enough for the rest of your life to live a rich life." Raised his hand to stop a few people who were eager to speak, Chenmo continued. "One thing I want to say in advance is that whether you go to Europe or stay to manage the martial arts school, you will come into contact with some secrets behind me, so once you choose, you can't go back. You'd better think about it." As soon as Chenmo's voice fell, Han Qing said, "Of course we're going with the owner. Yes, where you go, we will go. The life of my wife and children is saved by you, and I will give it to you. I'm going to Europe to fight with you." Without exception, all four chose to leave with Chenmo. It's not to say that Chenmo is kind to them. Just because Chenmo is strong and mysterious, they are willing to follow. It's human instinct to follow the strong in this war era. What's more, Chenmo is so nice to his subordinates that he usually treats them well. After Wang Kun's wife and children are kidnapped, he sneaks into the trap set by the other side himself. From the siege of dozens of gunmen, he rescues both his mother and son by himself and extinguishes all the forces that bind them. Later, the two families behind the scenes who planned to promote the event were completely eliminated, eliminating all the hidden dangers for them. There is a boss who cares and cares for his people so much. They have made up their mind for a long time. They have been silent for the rest of their lives. Old Albert, let alone, had he not met Chenmo, he might have curled up in some cold, dark corner of the Liverpool street and died alone, and sadly in the cold and hunger. At the time when he has accepted this kind of life, and waited for it to pass away peacefully, the young man in front of him brings hope to his lonely and gloomy life, and unfolds a new and sunny life with him. Old Albert, who has long looked down on life and death, only wants to repay Chenmo with the rest of his life. Follow him, take care of him, and protect him until the end of his life, because every day since he met Chenmo is extra, brand new and full of hope, which is brought by Chenmo. In the same way, Chenmo has always believed and valued old Albert very much. Although he is a butler in name, Chenmo actually regards him more as a friend and relative. Although he didn't say anything, Chenmo knew that there was no doubt that Albert would choose to leave with him. Two people's line of sight intersects, A tacit understanding arises spontaneously. A lot of things do not need to say more. With a slight nod, Chen Mo's eyes slowly swept over the faces of Huang Quan, Han Qing, Luo Zhen, and Wang Kun. In their eyes, Chen Mo read sincerity, gratitude, and reverence. For a long time, Chen Mo was very satisfied with the performance of the four of them and trained them as his confidants. They didn't let Chen Mo down. No one wanted to stay in charge of the underground forces in Brooklyn, and no one chose to leave with a huge sum of money. Power and money have not shaken their loyalty. They have no hesitation to continue to follow Chen Mo under Chen Mo's keen perception. No one can cheat him. Obviously, they are sincere. Although satisfied with their choice, Chen Mo still has to choose one person to stay in New York. The newly established Seven Commandments group needs to be controlled by others. The future New York is a very important part of Chen Mo's plan. When Chen Mo comes back next time, the Seven Commandments gang planned and developed by Chen Mo may play an unexpected role. Although there are Hydra and Shendan Bureau, it has been a long time for 70 years. No one can predict what will happen between them. No one can guarantee that everything will develop as expected, so Chen Mo decides to make more preparations. Chapter 48. It's Chen Mo's temporary intention to set up the Seven Commandments and control the underground forces in Brooklyn. Unlike Hydra and Shendan Bureau, Chen Mo's plan, layout, and final mastery are not the same. Behind them, the two groups are the Communist Party of China and the Allies. They are the two most powerful groups in the world. As the Hydra and Shendan Bureau, which control the most powerful and high-end combat power of the two groups, the strength of the two organizations is undoubtedly extremely huge. Compared with them, the Seven Commandments group, which controls the small underground forces in Brooklyn, is as weak as a child. But who can say for sure? What will this child grow up to in the future? Although all four want to continue to follow Chen Mo, the Seven Commandments sect must be in charge. Slowly scan a circle, Chen Mo lightly nodded. You are willing to follow me, and I will not treat you badly, but one of you still needs to stay and develop the Seven Commandments sect for me. In the future, I will use it. Four people look at each other. Although they can control a huge force by staying, they are not attracted by it. They are more willing to continue to follow Chen Mo. They are all pure warriors, pursuing the improvement of strength and the improvement of martial arts. They don't have much desire for material. As long as they can ensure the basic survival, they don't care about even if the environment is tough. It is precisely because of this that when they first came to the United States, although they lived in poverty and hardship, they preferred to work as coolies at the docks rather than rely on their own strength to do evil. They are real practitioners of martial arts. They have their own principles and pursuits. They do not violate their original intention. Just like at this time, how many people dream of the right status, but it has become a hot potato. No one is willing to take over. Fortunately, Chen Mo had plans for this. See, no one left. Chen Mo directly called. Wang Kun. Wang Kun, who was called by his name, said in spite of his reluctance, "The owner, it's up to you to stay in charge of the Seven Commandments. If you have a wife and children, you have to think about them. It's better for them to stay here." Yes, the owner. Although he would like to follow Chen Mo to Europe with other people, since Chen Mo has given orders, he has to comply with them. What the owner said is also reasonable. Staying in Brooklyn can better take care of his wife and children and make them live and grow better. In this way, Wang Kun, the leader of the future famous Seven Ring sect, the king of the underground forces in Brooklyn, is just like being abandoned and unwillingly takes over the underground forces in Brooklyn. Chen Mo reached into his arms and took out a syringe filled with transparent agents in blue. Passed the syringe to Wang Kun, and Chen Mo asks him to inject the medicine directly into the body. Although some doubts, but he did not hesitate. The syringe did not hesitate to plunge into the arm. The blue medicine slowly enters the body. As the blood flows all over the body, a strong pain comes from all parts of the body, as if all the cells in the body are destroyed and recombined. Fortunately, although the pain is strong, it can still be tolerated. As a martial artist, Wang Kun has a strong will. Instead of yelling like Howard, he grits his teeth and bears it silently. Sweat was spilling from him and his muscles were shaking uncontrollably, but he was still standing there, and he believed that Chen Mo would not harm him. Huang Quan and old Albert also stood and watched quietly. They were used to the mystery of Chen Mo and knew that he would not harm Wang Kun. They were full of doubts and guessed what the blue liquid was. The pain on Wang Kun's body gradually eased and disappeared. Wang Kun's muscles relaxed. He felt that he had nothing to do with it. He looked at Chen Mo with a puzzled face. With a smile on his lips, Chen Mo said to him, "Feel your body and brain." Wang Kun first shook his fist and felt the change of strength in his hand. He could not help but change his face. Then he punched in situ. He felt that his whole body was full of strength. Every move was faster and more powerful than before. With the familiarity of power, Wang Kun fought faster and faster, with heavy shadow and breaking wind. Huang Quan's people gradually couldn't see his movements clearly. Just now, they saw Wang Kun's strengthening process with their own eyes. Naturally, they saw the changes in his body. His body was a little bigger, and his muscles were more angular than before. Although it was not particularly obvious, they still saw these changes with their keen eyes. In addition, the strength and speed that he now shows are much faster than usual. The look on his face is more and more wonderful. Soon, Wang Kun stopped, felt the changes in his body, and looked at Chen Mo in shock. "The owner, I feel that the strength of my body is several times stronger than before. My mind is clear and my reaction is faster." Other people also looked at Chen Mo in unison. They had heard that there was a kind of stimulant. After injection, the strength would increase greatly in a short time. But in such a short time, Wang Kun's change was too great. "I don't know how many people regard the fortified serum as a stimulant," Chen Mo slowly explained. "This is an improved super soldier serum which can strengthen people's abilities in all aspects, including strength, speed, endurance, cell activity, bone strength, memory, reaction speed, etc., which will be much higher than before. After being strengthened, ordinary people can achieve 3 times the physical quality of ordinary people. Your body is already strong and should be able to achieve nearly 4 times the strength." Wang Kun was completely confused. He thought Chen Mo injected him with some powerful stimulant, but unexpectedly, it was a magic strengthening serum that can permanently strengthen all physical qualities. For a while, he was at a loss. The owner, such a precious thing. Wang Kun can't imagine how much he can permanently improve a person's physical quality and how valuable it is. Now, the owner of the museum has given him one. They don't know how much hard they have to work in order to improve their strength. Moreover, when their strength reaches a certain level, it's very difficult to improve their strength at all, but now it's increased several times at once. Feeling the surging power in his body, Wang Kun felt as if he was in a dream. "You have to stay here and take charge of the underground forces in Brooklyn. How can you do without strong enough strength? With your strength and strength now, I believe you can easily suppress even if there are any problems." Chapter 49. In this way, I can rest assured. Wang Kun's heart was very hot. His eyes were a little red, but he looked at Chen Mo with great determination. "Don't worry, the owner. I will go all out to develop the 7 Commandments sect. Don't just think about growing up. According to the plan I made, it's good to develop steadily. Don't pull down your own strength. Remember that the 7 Commandments sect is only a foreign thing and strength is the essence." "Yes, the owner." Chen Mo nodded and looked at the others. "You don't have to worry about it. It will strengthen you later." Although Chen Mo is one of the founders of Shendan Bureau and is qualified to distribute super soldier serum, as soon as the serum is developed, and the Shendan Bureau has not been used internally, Chen Mo first strengthens a group of his intimate subordinates. Even if the colonel doesn't say it, Chen Mo feels that the taste is too ugly. Wang Kun was strengthened first because he was about to leave. If it was just a serum, Chen Mo would not have any pressure to use power for personal gain. The next day, Chen Mo returned to Europe with old Albert, Huang Quan, Han Qing, and Luo Zhen. After Chen Mo and others left, Wang Kun, who took over the Seven Commandments, did not move into the more luxurious Luxian family headquarters, which is now the Seven Commandments residence, but still lived in the martial arts school with his wife and children. After Chen Mo left, some people who were forced to submit to Chen Mo because of his non-human power and were unwilling began to get restless. Wang Kun, who had greatly increased his strength through serum strengthening, suppressed these unstable factors with absolute strength and completely controlled the Seven Commandments. Then, according to the line determined by Chen Mo, Wang Kun developed steadily. After the development of the Seven Commandments, gang was on the right track. Wang Kun spent most of his time in the martial arts school, practicing martial arts and guns every day. When he was free, he taught several apprentices kung fu. Only when there were important things in the gang would he return to the headquarters of Green Street and deal with them personally. Ordinary people can't imagine that the moderate, polite, and highly skilled master of the martial arts school would be the godfather of the underworld who controls all the underground forces in Brooklyn. Many years later, with the martial arts school as the center, a new Chinatown gradually formed, and the martial arts school with ordinary appearance became the holy land in the hearts of the whole Brooklyn, even the whole New York underground forces. There were their revered and powerful godfather, and many legends that sounded legendary. But the shield hanging in the family hall reminded them that it was not just a legend. London, UK. After many days of sea turbulence, Chen and his delegation finally arrived at the underground base of the Strategic Science Reserve Team. But as soon as Chen Mo came back, he had to set out again, because he learned from the left behind that Colonel Phillips and Agent Carter had gone to the Italian front, where the trace of Hydra was found. What's more, Steve Rogers, the captain of the United States, is going to the Italian front line for a performance of condolence, while Bucky's 107 Regiment was defeated by the sudden nine-headed snake troops, and nearly 100 people were captured not long ago. This familiar situation surprised Chen Mo, who didn't expect to return to the original track under his large-scale intervention and change. Without accident, Steve will, with the help of Carter, fly Howard's plane across the war zone and dive into the Hydra base to rescue the captured Allied soldiers after knowing that Baki may be captured. It was this war that enabled him to show his value, gain the recognition of the soldiers and the colonel, and become a real captain of the United States. Suddenly, Chen Mo turns his head and looks to Howard, who slumps down in a chair and refuses to get up. "What am I doing? I tell you, if you want to go and have a good rest here for a few days, I will not go anywhere. I hate going by boat." Seeing Chen Mo's eyes looking weird, Howard shouted with a pig's face that was not afraid of boiling water. Although his body has been strengthened, the sea turbulence for more than 10 days still makes Howard suffering from seasickness. On the way, he vomited so much that he was full of energy and the whole person was about to collapse. Now sitting on the chair, he felt the earth shaking up and down. His brain was like a paste. He was dizzy. He seriously doubted whether the serum had magnified his seasickness ability. Chen Mo comes forward to pick up Howard, who pretends to be dead, and strides out. "Let's fly." At this time, the Italian front line, the Allied garrison. "Are you ready to join me in beating Hitler up?" Steve stood on the stage, dressed in a red, white, and blue tight suit, similar to the star-spangled flag pattern, holding a similarly painted shield in his hand, and shouted excitedly to the soldiers under the stage. At that time, Steve was very popular in the United States, making movies, comics, and performing stage plays. He was a household name, numerous fans, and a real star in China. He usually toured around the United States. When he asked questions, the enthusiastic audience would respond to him warmly. At this time, the American soldiers, including those standing on tanks and trucks in the distance, were all watching him silently without any response. The lines were all prepared in advance. Steve was at a loss for a moment because of the uncooperative soldiers. "All right." Seeing no one to respond for a long time, Steve had to brag and continue to follow the original lines. "I need a volunteer." "We've been volunteers for a long time, or what do you think we're doing here?" As soon as Steve's voice came down, one of the soldiers under the stage shouted. The other soldiers laughed as well. "We want to see the girls perform." Some people followed, and his words aroused the approval of the soldiers. They cheered and shouted. Compared with the Captain of America, who only showed on the stage but never went to the battlefield, they were obviously more interested in the beautiful girls. "They only dance one dance, but I try to find a way." The off-stage soldiers who did not follow the routine completely disrupted Steve's rhythm. He had not met this situation before, so he had to prepare to step down, comply with the requirements of the soldiers, and leave the stage to the dancing girls. "Go on, sweetheart. Beautiful boots, fairy." The soldiers under the stage were ungrateful and began to tease one after another. "Come on, guys, we're in the first team." Steve said helplessly. Chapter 50. "Hey, Captain, sign here." A soldier suddenly stood up, turned around and took off his pants, revealing his buttocks. Some people don't know where to take out a few tomatoes and throw them at Steve on the stage. Raising his shield to block the flying tomatoes, Steve watched the cheering soldiers under the stage and stepped off the stage in a complex mood. Then a group of pretty girls in short skirts on the stage won warm applause and cheers. The American soldiers in the front battlefield, however, haven't seen so many pretty girls for a long time. They are all staring at the stage with their eyes on the ground. Seeing Steve's face lost, the MP assistant at the back of the stage comforted him and said, "Don't worry, they will like you." The comfort of the aides didn't make Steve feel relieved. Although he didn't go to the battlefield, Steve always remembered that he was a soldier and was laughed at and attacked by his comrades, which made Steve feel very sad. The weather seemed to be affected by Steve's mood, and soon it began to rain. Steve sat alone in a shed behind the makeshift stage, drawing on the book with a pencil. The continuous rain drops accompanied by the dull thunder fell on the mud floor in front of him, making a patter sound, which could not affect him at all. "Hello, Steve." A soft magnetic voice suddenly sounded behind him. Steve, who was in the picture book, turned his head and was stunned. It turned out to be Peggy Carter, a beautiful agent who had not been seen for a long time. While Steve was reminiscing with Agent Carter, who had been away for a long time, 30 miles behind the Italian-German front, a huge factory-like base between two mountains was busy. Many ragged prisoners are working under the supervision of the armed Hydra soldiers. They are constantly carrying all kinds of heavy mechanical parts and materials. Everyone is exhausted, but under the threat of the Hydra soldiers, they had to bite their teeth and insist on it. If they slackened a little, they would surely get another beating. And in one corner of this huge factory building, there is a huge bomb piled up with the finished products. Depending on its size, its power will certainly not be weak, let alone the product of Hydra technology. It's no problem to level a small town. At this time, under these huge bombs, is standing a tall, bald man in a windbreaker with a cold temperament. On his side is an engineer-like middle-aged man, looking at the bald man with a worried face. "Baron Straker, we are fast. You need too many giant bombs." The middle-aged man carefully looked at the face of the bald man, that is, Baron Straker, in his mouth, and said cautiously, "The Führer can't wait too long, damn Schmidt." Suddenly, the construction plan of Valkyrie was transferred from Alpine headquarters to my base. The construction speed was greatly affected. The head of state had urged me several times and ordered me to complete the goddess on schedule and implement the plan of world destruction. When Baron Straker mentioned Red Skull Schmidt, His face was full of hatred. Hitler originally gave him the 9-headed snake to manage. Later, Schmidt did not know how to win Hitler's trust. He took the 9-headed snake from his hand and began to suppress him after that. At last, he had to shrink in the polished base and completely lost the control of the 9-headed snake. On the surface, he obeyed Schmidt's leadership, but in the dark, he was always looking for opportunities to take charge of Hydra. But I should also thank him. If he hadn't handed over the plan to me and disappeared for such a long time, I wouldn't have had the chance to regain control of most of the Hydra base and continue to serve as the head of state. Schmidt could not have imagined that the plan of destroying the world, which he had tried his best to open, would become the key help for the head of state to rule the world, who made him disappear for such a long time without a sound, and really thought that he was in complete control of Hydra. How arrogant! Hydra is always the most powerful sword in the hand of the Führer. It was only stolen by him temporarily. Now, as soon as he let go of it, Hydra is back in the hand of the Führer. In the view of the bases Chen Mo is going to give up, Schmidt has disappeared mysteriously for more than half a year. They were originally loyal to Hitler or ambitious people, without Schmidt's suppression and threat. In this case, their rebellion is inevitable. Under the leadership of Baron Straker, the original leader of Hydra, these bases were once again put into Hitler's arms. As for whether they were out of loyalty to Hitler or out of ambition and utilization, no one can say clearly. If Schmidt had disappeared for such a long time, would there be any conspiracy? The head of the base asked with some trepidation that he still had a deep fear of Schmidt, even if there is one. Now, except for the Alpine headquarters and a few small bases that don't know where to hide in the mountains and forests, the most powerful large bases are under our control. Although 2 bases close to the front line were destroyed by the hateful Strategic Science Reserve before, our strength is still much stronger than that of Schmidt. The weapons factory is basically in our hands. What can the small bases in those gullies do? After years of being suppressed by Schmidt, Baron Straker has lost control of Hydra. He knows little about the specific strength of Hydra now, especially the secret power controlled by Schmidt, and can only speculate from the strength and intelligence they have. But he didn't know that in these years, Hydra developed rapidly in Schmidt's hands, which was far beyond his imagination. What he saw and mastered was only the tip of the iceberg. Not to mention the top secret base and Alpine headquarters being built in Norway, but the small base hidden in the deep mountains and forests that he despises has far more power than their so-called large bases. How can Schmidt show the real power to these unstable elements, let alone give it to them? Although the technological strength they have in their hands is much stronger than that of their allies, they are all in the hands of Schmidt with the rest of the core high-end technology and powerful weapons. This not only enables him to completely control the whole Hydra, but also provides great convenience for Chen Mo's cleaning. Maybe he had a plan to clean up himself, but before he started, he was replaced by Chen Mo. Your Baroness has a point. The head of the research base knew nothing about the mystery of Hydra, and was easily persuaded by Baron Straker to let go of his worries about the potential threat of Schmidt. Chapter 51. The current situation of the head of state is not optimistic. The eastern front of Europe has fallen into a disadvantage. Under the continuous counterattack of the Soviet Red Army, the front has been collapsing. The western front is also in a stalemate under the alliance. Now we urgently need an opportunity to change the war situation, so our plan must be accelerated. The construction of Valkyrie is almost finished. Your bomb supply must keep up with it. Now it's too slow. From now on, increase the production by 60%. Without the support of Cosmic Cube's energy conversion technology, even using the latest big power bombs developed by Hydra, they need a considerable number of bombs to destroy a city, not to mention dozens of big cities. The number of bombs they need is even greater. But these workers are captives. I don't think they have the strength to do it. the head of the base said with some concern. Then use the rest of their strength. There will never be a shortage of workers. We will always have more prisoners. Baron Straker looked at the man in charge and said coldly, "Hi." Seeing Agent Carter greeting him, Steve quickly replied, "Why are you here?" It was a surprise for Steve to see the goddess in his heart. "In theory, I shouldn't be here." Carter put away his raincoat and sat down on the box next to the props. Carter and Colonel Phillips came here with the Strategic Science Reserve to deal with Hydra in secret, and their whereabouts are strictly confidential in order not to disturb them. A wonderful performance. Yes, I have to improvise. Thinking of what Carter saw just now, Steve explained with some embarrassment. Most of my audiences are. Steve sighed helplessly. Child. Senator Brad left Colonel Phillips to set up a war idol and drive sales of defense bonds. So his performance was mainly aimed at middle-class families, and the audience was mostly parents with children. As long as the performance is excellent, they won't grudge applause, but the soldiers are different. What they really respect and worship is the heroes on the battlefield, not the so-called American captain who only plays in movies and on the stage, but never on the battlefield. I hear your new hope for America, Carter said with a smile on his lips. Every time I go to a state, sales of government bonds go up 10%, Steve said blandly, not too much pride in his voice. It sounds like Senator Brad's idea. Carter doesn't like these politicians very much. At least he asked me to do it, and Colonel Phillips wanted to keep me in the lab. At the beginning, Dr. Erskine pretended to die. According to the normal procedure, he really wanted to send Steve to a new laboratory for research. Just like the plot in the movie, Senator Brad, who was found to be Steve's value, used his power to solicit and praise him to promote bonds. Obviously, his purpose was achieved. Do you have only two choices? Carter glanced at the juggling monkey in Steve's picture book, riding a unicycle and wearing a star-spangled banner uniform. He asked in reply that he hated iron but not steel. Laboratory mice or dancing monkeys? You know you can do more than that. They followed Chen Mo's advice, didn't tell Steve the truth, created the illusion that the doctor died and the super soldier plan failed, and successfully concealed it from everyone without any doubt. Now that it's been more than half a year, the storm has basically subsided. It's time to tell him the truth and let the super soldier return to the team. Steve knew nothing about it at this time. After listening to Carter, he looked at her in a complicated mood, but he didn't talk for a long time. What's the matter? Carter asked strangely. You know what? My dream has always been to go to foreign battlefields to the forefront to serve my country. When I finally got it, I was wearing a tights. At this point, Steve's mood was extremely frustrated. He wanted to fight with the enemy on the front line like other soldiers, instead of performing on the stage to lift motorcycles and beat up Hitler to sell bonds. At this time, there was a noise. Steve and Carter looked around and saw that a battlefield ambulance with Red Cross painted on its body stopped in front of the tent of the field hospital, and a stretcher was lifted down, on which lay a seemingly injured wounded man. They seemed to have just had a bad fight, Steve guessed. These soldiers are the worst, Carter, who knew the inside story, exclaimed. Steve looked at Carter and wondered what was going on. This time she came. She was going to let Steve join the Shendan Bureau. Naturally, there is nothing to keep secret. Hydra sent out a force, 200 soldiers to fight, less than 50 came back. There are 107 infantry survivors in your audience. Others are either killed or captured. Hearing Carter's words, Steve's heart suddenly shocked and hurriedly asked, 107 infantry. What's the matter? Carter asked in some confusion. Steve had no idea about anything else. He got up and ran to the headquarters in the rain. The 107 Infantry Regiment was his good friend Badgie's army. Steve rushed into the tent of the headquarters at one go, and sat in it was Colonel Phillips, who was going to send him to the laboratory for research. He was not surprised. Steve, who was worried, was not in the mood to be polite and said directly, Colonel Phillips, I need a casualty list for the Battle of Bolzano. You don't deserve to order me, boy." Angry with Steve's outspoken tone, the colonel squinted at him and taught, "I just want to know about Sergeant James Barnes of the 107th Infantry." Worried about Bucky's safety, Steve explained. The colonel heard that Carter must have told Steve about the nine-headed snake. He was angry that she had disclosed secrets to Steve without consulting with him. Although Steve would join the Shield sooner or later, he didn't think it was a good time. Senator Brad would have some trouble. The colonel had intended to come back in a few months when Steve finished his tour and completed the task of selling bonds, which was not so important to Senator Brad. Carter, who stood behind Steve and pretended to clean his raincoat, glared fiercely. The colonel pointed at her with his pen and said with a poor face, "I'll see you later. Please tell me he's alive, B.R." Chapter 52. Steve asked again with a serious face and spelled Bucky's name directly. "I know how to spell it." The colonel cut him off in a bad temper, got up and turned over a stack of letters in his hand. "I signed a lot of morning letters today. I can't remember the name clearly, but I have an impression on the name." "I'm sorry." Steve can't help but be stunned when he hears the words. He really can't accept the result. He doesn't believe that Backy died so easily. "What about the others? Are you going to the rescue?" Steve asked, not to give up. "Yes, as long as they win the war, they will be saved." The colonel perfunctorily said that he was too lazy to explain his plan to Steve, a new recruit who had never been to the battlefield. In fact, he has no good way now. Chen Mo is not here. He has no powerful combat power. It's too difficult to rely on special forces alone. Steve frowned at his words. "But since you know where they are, why not? 30 miles behind the enemy lines, they have to go through the most heavily guarded areas in Europe. If they go to rescue, we will only lose more people." The colonel interrupted Steve's question and went to the battle map hanging on the wall to have a competition. A black mark on the map stands for Hydra, where the newly discovered Hydra base is located. "I don't expect you to understand that because you're just a dancing clown." The colonel is still so fierce. He is similar to most of the other soldiers. He doesn't really look like Steve at this time. Steve has never been to the battlefield. He is a real rookie, but he ran to his own hands and feet. He had a headache about the sudden change of Hydra and rescue. If it wasn't for Chen Mo's apprentice and future members of the Shendun Bureau, he would have driven him out of the headquarters. "I think I understand." Faced with the colonel's contempt, Steve took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Then go somewhere else to understand." The colonel took a look at Steve and turned away, but the voice continued. "If I read the poster correctly, you'll have to be somewhere else in 30 minutes. Steve stared at the black mark on the map that represented the base of Hydra, made a note of its location, and said in a deep voice, "Yes, sir, I will." With that, Steve turned and strode away from the headquarters. Carter took a look at the colonel, who was checking the information on the table with his back to her. Seeing that he didn't notice himself, he quickly followed. Steve went straight back to the locker room backstage and packed up. "What's your plan? Go to Austria." Carter then came in, saw Steve packing up and asked aloud. If necessary, Steve didn't look up. "You heard the colonel. Your friend may be dead." Carter didn't want him to rush straight to Hydra base to save people. "But I'm not sure. Steve and Bucky are brothers. He won't be reconciled if he doesn't try." Even so, the colonel is already making plans. It will take time. Carter still tried to persuade him. "It's too late for him to plan." Steve said excitedly that he could not care to speak to the goddess in front of his brother's safety. Put the possible things into the backpack and put a leather jacket on the outside of the tight uniform. Steve finally picked up the iron shield for the performance, ignored Carter's advice, and strode out of the dressing room. "Steve!" Carter chased after him in a hurry. He didn't even have time to wear a raincoat. Steve went out of the dressing room, threw his backpack and shield into a jeep parked at the door, and watched Carter's face in the rain with deep concern and anxiety. He couldn't help but move. "Is it true that you said I could do more than that?" Steve looked at Carter with a serious face. Her hair was wet by the rain, sticking to her body, looked a little embarrassed, but Steve felt that she was so beautiful. Absolutely. Carter said solemnly that she believed that Steve would play his role and be respected by everyone when he joined the Shield. Then let me go, Steve said, turning and sitting in the cab. Looking at Steve's figure, Carter's eyes are full of love, integrity and kindness, love and justice and wisdom and courage. Maybe that's why she likes Steve. Seeing Steve start his car to leave, he hurriedly grabbed the steering wheel and looked up at Steve with firm eyes. There was a conflict in his heart. She knew it was too dangerous to let him go, but she couldn't stop Steve. At this time, she really didn't know what to do. At this time, a roaring engine sound sounded in the distant sky. The sound was getting louder and closer. The two people in the standoff looked up to the direction of the sound. Before long, a small silver twin propeller plane roared in their field of vision. The plane flew very low, only tens of meters above the ground, straight towards them. There was a commotion around the soldiers, but they were soon dispersed by their officers. Obviously, this was not an enemy plane. The speed of the plane is very fast and the altitude is still decreasing. Soon, the plane is close to Steve's two people's sky, and the altitude is less than 20 meters. Just before the plane arrived at the two people, about to fly over their heads, a figure suddenly jumped out of the plane. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. At such a low altitude, it only takes less than 2 seconds to land, and even the parachute can't be opened. Moreover, they can clearly see that the figure jumped didn't carry a parachute at all. In the shocked eyes of Steve and the soldiers around him, the black figure fell rapidly from the sky. Faster and faster, straight and vigorous body, rode the rain curtain like a sword straight into the earth. Boom! There was a dull sound in front of the Jeep, and the figure jumped out of the plane, fell straight on the ground in front of the two people. The huge impact force made the ground shake for one, and the ground was smashed into a pit. The muddy soil mixed with the rain splashed out. A tall figure with slightly bent knees and back stood there steadily. It's hard to imagine that he jumped down from the height of nearly 20 meters and landed safely without any injury. In the unbelievable eyes of all the people, the great figure in the black combat suit slowly stood up straight and raised his head. Steve and Carter finally saw his face. Master! Not far from the camp gate of the headquarters, Colonel Phillips looked pleased and proud. Chapter 53. As soon as the sound of the plane sounded, he walked out of the headquarters. He saw everything just now. Chen Mo's falling from the sky made him very surprised. Worthy of being the strongest commander of our Shield Bureau, this is the real super fighter. Look at Steve on the Jeep. The colonel snorted scornfully. Son of a bitch, compared with your master, you are far behind. On the plane, Steve still looked at Chen Mo excitedly. Chen Mo surprised him with his amazing appearance and interrupted his impulsive plan to break through the enemy's tight line of defense by himself. Since Dr. Erskine was assassinated, he and Chen Mo have not seen each other for more than half a year, and his impression of Chen Mo is still before he left. At that time, Chen Mo had not been strengthened, which was similar to his current strength. Unexpectedly, Chen Mo showed more strength than him. Steve asked himself that he couldn't do it when he jumped from such a high altitude and landed on the ground without any injury. In addition to the super strength and skeletal muscle strength, the super unloading skills are also essential. Obviously, the gap between Chen Mo and him is still huge in any aspect. In fact, Chen Mo is also forced to do it. He is not bored to have nothing to do with jumping machines. In London, I learned that Steve went to the Italian front line for a performance of condolence, and after a period of time, the 9-headed snake rebel base began to change again. Chen Mo knew that it was not good. Again, sure enough, Bucky's 107 Infantry Regiment was attacked by 9-headed snakes and hundreds of people were captured. Now Howard is by his side. Without him flying the plane, with Chen Mo's understanding of Steve, he is likely to break into the defense in spite of his own safety. Even if he is strengthened by super soldier serum, his strength is incomparable, but it will be more dangerous and less fortunate for him to fight hard against the enemy's positions with his flesh and blood on the front battlefield. After all, Steve has not been able to ignore the bullets. Under the heavy rain, heavy fire coverage, gunfire, and even the steel torrent of armored vehicles and tanks, the frontal battle is only to be crushed. Worried about Steve's accident, Chenmo directly took Howard's plane, which had not recovered from serious seasickness, across the English Channel and flew directly to Italy. The plane was supposed to land at the airport near the barracks, but when the plane arrived at the barracks, Chenmo, in front of the porthole with his Superman's vision, keenly found Steve and Carter in a space in the barracks, who were in deadlock. Wait for the plane to land and come back. Maybe Steve has run out of sight. Chenmo can't wait for Howard to lower his altitude and jump off the plane. The unloading skills learned from Huang Quan played a role. Otherwise, even with Chenmo's non-human power, it would not be easy to land so easily and stably. At that time, there would be a lazy donkey rolling around, unloading part of the impact force, which could not be so shocking and domineering. On the plane at this time, in addition to Howard, who is still driving in front of the plane, there are beautiful Agent Peggy Carter, who just stopped Steve from risking his life to save people. After Chenmo's miraculous appearance from the sky, Carter's attitude immediately changed 180 degrees. Howard flew through the most difficult battlefield blockade area, and the rest dived into the base to save people. For Chenmo, who almost killed 2 Hydra bases by himself, it's not too simple. With Chenmo walking with Steve, Carter took this opportunity to adapt Steve to the operation style of Shendon Bureau. To be precise, it is Chenmo, the special team commander of Shendon Bureau. Chenmo lived up to Carter's expectations and showed Steve the strength of the shield and the style of his commander on the plane. The plane is Howard's private plane. There are only a few comfortable leather seats in the small cabin. The floor and bulkhead are covered with a layer of iron sheet. The front is directly connected with Howard's cab, and the rear area is separated by a curtain. Although it seems to Chenmo that it is a little crude, it is very luxurious in this era. Under the eyes of Steve and Carter, Chenmo went straight to the rear of the cabin and opened the curtain in front of him. The space behind the curtain is not large. It may be used as a warehouse. The bulkhead does not even have the iron sheet covered by decoration, which directly exposes the steel skeleton of the body. In this small space, there is a huge box nearly 2 meters long. Open it. Chenmo carries back to call Steve. Let him open the box by himself. Steve was also curious about the things in the box at this time. He knew that Chenmo could take them out so seriously, and the things in the box would not be ordinary. From Chenmo's indifferent face, Steve simply reached out and opened the box. Carter got up and came to Steve's side. She was also curious. Chenmo was so mysterious. What was in the box? As the box was opened, a silver light first caught their eyes. At the top of the box, there is a round shield made of silver metal with a diameter of about 70–80 cm. The shield body bulges a tiny arc which looks thick and solid. Steve looked at Chenmo in disbelief. He didn't understand what the shield meant. Carter is as like as 2 peas. She has seen Chen's shield. The shield is almost the same as that used by Chenmo, but Chen's face has been painted black by him. The shield's surface is bright and smooth, and it looks more like a new one. I'm going to fight with Hydra head-on in a moment. Your performance items can also block pistol bullets. When you encounter rifles and heavy machine guns, they will be easily torn. Chenmo glanced at Steve's iron shield, his eyes full of disdain. In the box is the combat equipment I prepared for you and the crystallization of the highest technology of Shendon Bureau. Chenmo points to the shield on the top of the box. This shield and the sword below are modeled on my weapon, made of Edelman alloy. Steve looked at the box again, only to find a long sword under the shield. Steve first picked up the shield, looked at it carefully, and found that it was a lot heavier and stronger than his original prop shield. Edelman is the hardest metal in the world. It's indestructible. This shield can withstand almost all weapons without any damage. Steve's eyes were wide, and he looked at the shield in his hand incredulously. It was hard for him to imagine that this seemingly ordinary shield was so powerful. Then I can't wait to put the shield on my arm. With this shield I can't help but grasp how to rescue Baki. Don't worry, it's not over. Chenmo shook his head helplessly and raised his hand to the box. Chapter 54. This long sword is also made of Edelman alloy. It's extremely sharp. As long as it's powerful enough, it can easily cut iron like mud, and there's no need to worry about it breaking. Steve just remembered the following long sword. He usually performed with shields. He was not familiar with cold weapons such as long sword. He didn't pay attention to it just now. After hearing Chen Mo's explanation, he knew that this long sword of two-handed knights in the Middle Ages was also unusual. The space in the cabin is limited. Steve just picked up the long sword and tried to feel it. The weight of several kilograms in his hand is light as nothing, and the long sword with both hands is easy to use with one hand. Satisfied with the two weapons, Steve turned to Chen Mo and thanked him. "Thank you, Master. With them, I will be able to save Bucky." Chen Mo feels helpless again. He seriously doubts whether Steve's IQ is 0 at this time. Since I knew that Baki was in danger, I was going to drive a jeep, rely on a shield to break through the German defense line, and break into the Hydra base to save people. Now my eyes are so poor that I can only see one thing in front of me. I am so stupid that I think that there are only two cold weapons in such a big box. If he hasn't been around for a long time to teach himself, he will forget his basic calmness. Chenmo stares at Steve hard, which makes him feel cold. It seems that he remembers the day when he was taught by Chenmo in the martial arts school. Just when Steve was confused, Chenmo said coldly, "There's also an alderman armored combat suit in the box. Please change it for me now." Steve knew the reason for Chenmo's anger. He had been remembering Badgie's affairs in his mind. He was always a little uneasy. "Master once taught me to keep calm all the time. He must be angry that I was in a panic when something happened and he failed to deal with it calmly." Thinking about it, Steve took a deep breath and his eyes settled down slowly. When looking at Chenmo again, there is no more impatience and uneasiness in his eyes. "Yes, Master." After being taught a lesson by Chenmo, Steve took off his coat and trousers, picked up the black alloy armor combat suit in the box and put it on. Fortunately, he was still wearing the tight uniform during the performance. Otherwise, Carter would be wondering whether to turn around or secretly feast his eyes. Steve, who was big and strong, was even more majestic when he put on his armor suit. Carter's eyes were shining, his breath was very fast, and his chest went up and down with his breath. With this all over Edelman armor, you just need to protect your head with a shield, not to be hit by heavy weapons, so you are basically not afraid of any attack. Chenmo glanced at Carter, who was in a state of narcissism, and said slowly from his seat. Carter walked quickly to Steve with a little star in his eyes, and his fingers touched the alloy armor on his chest. The cold and hard steel texture makes her feel a cool fingertip. It seems that there is a current flowing down the armor, which makes her feel numb and hot. Steve looked at the beautiful Carter in front of him, and he was at a loss for a while. Chenmo, who sits comfortably in the leather seat, is amused by the look of the two. It's clear that Lang Yaoking's concubine is interested in it, but she refuses to break the last window paper. Carter soon woke up from his infatuation with flowers, pretended to take back his hand naturally, and returned to his seat with a little red cheek. Steve came back to his senses, glanced at Chenmo, and happened to meet his eyes with some inexplicable meaning. As if he had done something bad and was caught by his parents, Steve quickly turned back and ran to the box. He took a pile of things out of the box, including a set of black combat clothes, a special strap for mounting sword shield, 2 pistols and matching holsters, clips and fittings. Without Chen Murphy's instruction, Steve consciously put on his battle suit and other things. The shield is hung on the back and fixed by a special clasp, which is convenient to take and put, and does not affect the movement and battle. The long sword is inserted vertically in the inner side of the shield. The guard hand is just exposed. The hilt is at the back of the head. The backhand can hold it accurately, and the sword can be quickly drawn out in the battle. Carter managed to control the little star in his eyes, coughed softly to hide his discomfort, then took out a map and explained the situation of Hydra Base to the 2 people around him. This Hydra Base is located in Krausberg between 2 mountains. According to the photos taken from high altitude by the reconnaissance aircraft, it looks more like a huge factory. "I'll try to get you to the door," Howard in the cab turned to a few people and said with a hint of excitement. Howard, who was almost seasick and fainted at first, was pulled on the plane by Chen Mo and immediately became alive. He drove from London to the Italian front line and then flew to the Krausberg base behind the enemy without any fatigue. He was exactly like 2 people on the ship. Maybe they all have flying genes in the Stark family, but in the future his son Tony Stark will play more high-tech. "No, there are empty cannons in Hydra Base. Your plane will disintegrate if it gets shot." "With my technology," Howard just wanted to refute, stressed his superb driving skills, dodged the anti-aircraft fire a piece of cake. The result was just a mouth Chen Mo mercilessly blocked back. "No matter how good your technology is, there is still a lot of risk. Steve and I don't care. We can't die if the plane breaks up. It doesn't matter if you die. But Agent Carter, you have to send me back safely. If you don't succeed, you still want to take her with you to perform the flying man in the air." Howard is afraid to say anything by Chen Mo. It's just that he takes Chen Mo's risks. Who makes Chen Mo his boss or the godfather of his future children? There is no pressure on him, but Carter is different. He feels bad about letting her take risks with him. Chen has long found that Howard's character is very wonderful, which can be said to be very contradictory. He is afraid of death at ordinary times but likes to pursue stimulation. When he is overexcited, he will ignore danger, be bold and radical, and often make very risky moves. Howard stopped talking. Chen Mo looked at the map and spoke directly. "Now that we've crossed the German line, we'll go into the mountains and find the Hydra Base. Steve and I will jump out of the sky and you 2 will return to the sea." What else did Carter want to say? Chen Mo raised his hand to stop him. Chapter 55. So it was decided that the rest of the journey was not difficult for us and there was no need to risk approaching. After all, Chen Mo is the commander of the Shandong Bureau. He has always made the plan of operations. He is the main force in all operations. Even Colonel Phillips seldom takes part in his operations. Hydra Base is only 30 miles away from the front line. It quickly enters the mountain area and approaches the base at the speed of aircraft. Chen Mo pretended to take out his weapons and equipment from the cargo bin at the end of the cabin. The Zhenjin shield and the sword of the king were carried behind him. 2 black and M1911 pistols were inserted into the holster on both sides of his thigh, and the arm belt at his waist was inserted with 20 throwing knives made of Edelman alloy. After confirming the location of Hydra Base, Chen Mo and Steve parachuted ahead of time outside the 2 hills from the base. "Be careful!" Carter stood at the door of the cabin and shouted to the 2 men. Chen Mo didn't think that she was saying to herself. Even if she did, it was by the way. Under the cover of the night, Chen Mo and Steve landed quietly in the woods, arranged their equipment, and they found their way to the Hydra Base. Originally not far from the base, with their extraordinary speed and physical strength, they soon quietly dived near the Hydra Base and hid in a forest in front of the gate. The nearby Hydra base is like a giant beast lurking in the night, and the huge buildings of tens of meters high are like a huge dam across the mountains, even blocking the sky in the distance. The whole base is surrounded by a wall composed of tall concrete columns and barbed wire. Only a gate is left in front of Chen Mo and connected with the outside through a forest path. More than 10 bright searchlight columns are constantly scanning inside and outside the base, which is very striking in the dark. It's not easy to sneak in quietly. Although the wall is nothing to Chen Mo, it's easy to cut off the sword of the king. With the strength of Chen Mo and Steve, it's easy to directly cross the pass. But there is a wide open space between the fence and the base. Even if the two people are fast, they can easily be exposed under the searchlights that are frequently scanned back and forth so as to scare the grass. They hid in the woods and waited for the chance. Just as Steve was about to wait impatiently, Chen Mo suddenly whispered, "Here we are." Steve looked at Chen Mo doubtfully and found that his eyes were on the end of the forest path connecting the Hydra base. Steve's eyes also turned to the past, saying that it was a forest path which was actually 3 or 4 meters wide. The road was directly opened in the forest, with tall and lush trees on both sides. In Steve's eyes there was a movement at the end of the road. First there was a faint engine sound, closer and clearer to them, and then 2 lights came from the darkness. Obviously a vehicle was coming. Before long, several trucks drove out of the corner at the end of the road. Chen Mo glanced at Steve and whispered a warning. "Follow me." Steve nodded and followed Chen Mo quietly to the side of the road. After several trucks passed by, Chen Mo took the lead, quickly flashed out of the hiding forest, rushed to the back of the last truck, and a jump directly turned into the car. Steve followed and jumped in. When he stood still in the carriage, he saw Chen Mo sitting down on the wooden box on one side of the carriage, while 2 armed Hydra soldiers were lying on the ground with a flying knife in their eyes. "Take back the throwing knife and throw out all the bodies." Chen Mo sat on the material box and said, "There is an apprentice around." Naturally, Chen Mo doesn't have to deal with these small things in person. "Yes, master." Steve quickly agreed to pull out the throwing knife, wipe it clean and hand it back to Chen Mo. He easily picked up a body and threw it out of the back of the car. The truck they are in is at the end of the motorcade. Behind the truck is a dark and dead forest. There is no light source. There is only one piece of darkness in sight. Nothing can be seen. There is no need to worry about being found abnormal by the people in front. The truck team smoothly entered the gate of Hydra base and stopped in front of the warehouse on one side of the base in turn. The materials carried by the truck will be unloaded here one by one. Several armed Hydra soldiers patrol back and forth in front of the warehouse, and a group of workers quickly arrive at the first truck to start carrying materials. While the outside workers and guards did not notice this side, Chen Mo and Steve quickly jumped out of the car, under the cover of the car body, diving towards the towering base building in the night. There is a wide open space between the warehouse and the huge base building. There are 10 black heavy tanks and armored vehicles neatly parked in the open space. The skull and Hydra sign on the body is even colder and more evil in the dark. Obviously, there is a large number of 9-headed snake regiment armored mechanized troops stationed in this base. Steve cannot help but worry about whether he can successfully rescue the prisoners later. However, seeing Chen Mo's steady and tall figure in front of him, Steve settled down inexplicably in his heart, gave up his thoughts and followed him closely. Under the cover of tanks and armored vehicles, dodging the sight of searchlights and patrolling Hydra soldiers, he quickly crossed the open space and came to the bottom of a row of long buildings connected with the base building. A heavy armored vehicle more than 3 meters high was parked right beside the wall. Chen Mo on the armored car quickly turned over the roof, followed by Steve, completely disappeared in the view of the 9-headed snake soldiers patrolling below. The 2 men ran to the tall base building in the distance along the roof. The height of the buildings along the way was different, but the height of 3 or 5 meters was not a problem for them. They climbed and climbed all the way, approached the lower part of the building quietly in the night, and successfully dived into the base from a window. Chenmo is very clear about the situation in the base, including the internal structure and layout of the whole building. In order to prevent the attack, Chenmo carefully sensed the surrounding situation, led Steve to avoid the wave of 9-headed snake soldiers, and smoothly passed through the periphery into the inner core area of the base. The huge production workshop of the weapon factory was fully exposed in front of the two people. The outer part of the whole building is a layer of separated floors. In the middle of the building, the area that accounts for nearly half of the whole building is connected up and down, with a huge production workshop of tens of meters high. Crisscross heavy steel skeleton, densely distributed around the plant, strengthened and supported the whole space. Chapter 56. All kinds of machinery, equipment, and huge steel parts cover the whole huge workshop, which looks like a steel world. Many of them are more than 10 meters tall, and even Steve, who used to work in the factory, has no idea what they are for. Even at night, there were still hundreds of workers busy, but Steve did not find any of the prisoners. These workers, dressed in uniform and in good spirits, were obviously members of the Hydra, but they did not know where the captured Allied soldiers were locked. At this time, Chenmo and Steve are standing on a platform more than 10 meters high on one side of the factory building. Here is an exit connecting the factory building on the 4th floor. Originally, a 9-headed snake soldier was guarding here, but Chenmo and Steve suddenly killed them. Are these? Steve looked at a special area of the factory with some doubts. There were hundreds of cigar-shaped objects, 5 or 6 meters high. And the whole factory seems to be producing this kind of big guy. Those are Hydra's latest super bombs. It seems that this is their bomb factory. Chenmo's answer surprised Steve. Such a huge bomb, which is also the top technology product of Hydra, must be very powerful. It may take only one to completely blow up the base, but there are hundreds of such super bombs here. In fact, Steve's guess is not wrong, but he underestimated the power of this super bomb. According to Chenmo's information, this kind of super bomb is filled with a kind of high explosive developed inside Hydra, which is 5 times as powerful as TNT explosive. Each bomb has an internal charge of up to 30 tons, equivalent to 150 tons of TNT explosives, with an explosion radius of more than 500 meters. Its power is many times stronger than that of the father of bombs. Even in Chenmo's era, it's also a big weapon, second only to the most destructive weapon of mankind, the nuclear bomb, and in today's nuclear weapons have not been developed, is worthy of the most powerful weapons of mass destruction. What do they want to do? Steve's voice was a little dignified, and he couldn't imagine what would happen if the bombs were dropped on Allied positions. Don't worry about that much. First find the place where the prisoners are being held. Chenmo knows that these bombs are not just intended to be put on the battlefield. After Chenmo's reminder, Steve realized that he was here to save the captives and find Baki. It's so big here. How can we find it? Steve put down his worries caused by these huge number of super bombs for a while, and once again turned his attention to understanding and saving the prisoners. As Chenmo said, the priority is to save the prisoners first, and then consider the rest later. Large numbers of captives cannot be kept in high places. They should be kept on the 1st floor or underground for the convenience of management. Chenmo, who knows the situation of the base as well as his fingers, is very clear that hundreds of captured Allied soldiers are now being held in a cell under the factory. Let's split up and take them out as soon as we find them. The farther away, the better. Once these bombs detonate, the whole base will be razed to the ground, and the surrounding area will be affected within kilometers. Steve was worried about Baki's safety. He nodded and went downstairs to find the place where the prisoners were being held. Chen Mo did not go downstairs, but walked slowly towards the top of the base. In the control room on the top floor of the base, Baron Straker is standing in front of the control console. In front of him is a row of observation windows arranged in an arc like an airport tower. Through the glass, you can have a panoramic view of the whole factory. Under his command, the captured Allied soldiers began to work in the early hours of the morning and were not taken back to the underground cells until a short time ago. As the ultimate weapon in the world destruction plan, the supply of super bombs must be sufficient. If not for the maximum use of these prisoners, Baron Straker even wanted them to work 24 hours a day. These people's lives were no different from those of ants in his eyes. As long as they could rule the world, how many people would die? Just as he was planning to continue attacking Allied forces and capturing captives to increase the production of super bombs, a fierce gunshot and continuous explosion suddenly sounded outside the base. Baron Straker, with a heavy complexion, turned his head to the monitor on the console. In the picture, the 9-headed snake soldiers guarding the outside of the base were fighting with a group of Allied prisoners suddenly pouring out of the base building. This Hydra base is located in the rear of the German front, more than 30 kilometers away from the front line. As long as the front line does not collapse, they will be very safe here. However, the German front has always been very stable. No matter how fierce the Allied attacks are, there is no way to move forward. Therefore, the defense of Hydra base is very lax. According to Chen Mo's instructions, Steve quickly found the captives in the underground and rescued them. To Steve's surprise, Bucky, who was supposed to have died, was among them. Not to mention how surprised Badgeja was at the sight of Steve, who had been greatly transformed by serum strengthening. He killed many Hydra soldiers when he just broke in. He was afraid that Steve, who was found, would follow Chen Mo's orders and lead the people to evacuate outside the base. As for Chen Mo, Steve didn't worry. Just having the same equipment as himself was enough to ensure his safety, let alone his much stronger and stronger strength. I believe that hearing his breakthrough, Chen Mo will soon come to join us. Steve took off his shield from behind and put it on his left arm. Then he pulled out his sword with his right hand and led them to rush out of the base. Steve, who was extremely powerful, armed and fearless of bullets, led the way to break through. The first 9-headed snake soldiers contacted with them were rushed to the front and killed directly before they reacted. The weapons were in the hands of the Allied prisoners. By the time they rushed out of the base building, nearly half of them had weapons in their hands. The defense of Hydra base behind the defense line is too lax. They never thought that they would escape from the heavily guarded base building when they were captured as slaves and laborers by the Allied forces. There are only a few hundred Hydra soldiers in the whole base, and most of them are in the base building. Suddenly, the Hydra soldiers outside were killed by Steve and the Allied prisoners who rushed out. Chapter 57. When Baron Straker in the control room found something unusual, he sounded the alarm, and a large number of Hydra soldiers began to emerge from the base building. One side of the captives, with Steve's super strength, rushed forward directly against the pouring bullets, and quickly reaped the lives of Hydra soldiers with long swords in their hands. More and more people got weapons, and they did not fall into a disadvantage in firepower. The two sides were even and fought a fierce battle outside the base. As the unattended tanks and armored vehicles parked in the open space were occupied by the Allied prisoners, the situation outside began to tilt to Steve's side, and the Hydra soldiers who rushed out of the base building were constantly killed by their own weapons. The shells of the tank exploded on the ground, the hit trucks and walls were easily torn up, and the fragments of the body were splashed everywhere, leaving only a burning sea of fire in place. Machine gun bullets cut through the night sky, reaping the life of a Hydra soldier. The Hydra side lost more and more and began to be completely suppressed by Steve's side. When Baron Straker found out that the situation was out of control, his face was as gloomy as water and his fist hit the console severely. Damn it! How did these guys get out? In the face of Baron Straker's angry questioning, the head of the bomb factory was silent. Through the monitor, they can clearly see that the Hydra soldiers are losing under the attack of the captured Allied soldiers, especially Steve, who is a big man with a shield and sword, is cutting and killing all the way. Seeing that his soldiers were not rivals at all, and that the base was almost out of defense, Baron Straker turned to a console and pressed the switches one by one. "No, what are you doing?" The plant leader saw that he actually started the self-explosive device of the base and planned to blow up the whole base. He could not ignore the fear of him anymore and rushed forward to try to stop it. "Our soldiers are not rivals. Do we leave the base for them to occupy?" Baron Straker pushed him away and continued to turn on all the self-destruct devices. The person in charge of the pushed base looked at the fierce figure in the black combat suit on the surveillance screen, holding a long sword and cutting back and forth among the 9-headed snake soldiers. His heart was cold. If the base is broken, he will not end well. He doesn't want to cut the sharp sword on himself. Just as he was about to run away in panic, the door of the control room was suddenly hit by a huge force, and the whole heavy iron door fell off the door frame, flew inward into the control room, and fell heavily on the ground in front of the two people. The person in charge of the base who was trying to escape was so scared by the sudden change that he stepped back and stopped until he hit the console. He looked at the door of the control room with fear on his face. Baron Straker looked at the iron door with his eyes on the ground, and the corners of his eyes were twitching. The iron door has been deformed at this time. In the middle part of the door, the iron plate has been deeply sunken, showing a clear footprint. Obviously, the heavy iron door was kicked in with great strength. Baron Straker looked up at the door and saw a tall and burly figure slowly walking in from the door. His black combat suit and a long sword hilt showed behind him made him think of the strong figure in the monitor picture. Aren't you down there? How can it be?" On one side, the panicked leader of the base asked the doubts in his heart instead of him. The head of the visitor seems to be wearing a mask. Only a pair of eagle-like sharp eyes are exposed outside. The fierce eyes sweep slowly through the control room. When looking at him, they make him feel cold all over the body. The person in charge of the base hiding behind is shivering. Finally, his eyes stopped on the monitor screen. "Are you talking about him?" A cold, low voice came from under the mask. The two men in front of the console turned their heads and looked at the screen. They saw a figure dressed exactly like the one in front of them. They were waving swords to kill a 9-headed snake soldier easily. Obviously, there is another person standing in front of them at this time, and there is no doubt that he is with the following people. As soon as Baron Straker's face was cold, his eyes flashed. His right hand quickly drew a long and thin stabbing sword from under his windbreaker. His feet moved fast, and he stabbed the man in front of him in the chest. This is a classic noble sword with exquisite and luxurious decoration. It is a gorgeous carved hand guard. The blade is thin and thick, and it is a flat diamond. It is suitable for stabbing and can also cut. It has a strong penetration ability. Baron Straker is a real German aristocratic baron proficient in fighting and a master of swordsmanship. His swordsmanship is precise, fast, and fierce. Chenmo looks at the long sword stabbed to his chest quickly. Without the defense of alloy armor, he sees that the tip of the sword will stab his chest. Chenmo quickly sidesteps. Chenmo is going to fight back. Unexpectedly, the long sword that had been stabbed in the air suddenly turned to sharpen and quickly crossed Chenmo's chest. Chenmo didn't expect that Baron Straker's response was so rapid, but he couldn't avoid it completely. The battle suit on his chest was cut a long way by the tip of the sword, revealing the black armored battle suit inside. Quickly pulled out of a distance, Chen Mo looked at Baron Straker with a sword in front of him. Since he came to this world, Chen Mo has always been able to count as a smooth sailing with the help of his foresight of being familiar with the plot of the movie and his physical quality beyond the ordinary people. Whether it's the most powerful villain boss, Red Skull Schmidt, the leader of Hydra, or the Mafia family, the leader of the underground forces in Brooklyn, are easily killed by him. However, the long-term smooth sailing and continuous improvement of strength have changed his mentality, and he has become more and more confident, arrogant, and even arrogant. From the very beginning, it was carefully designed and built step by step. A trap was set up in the church to blow up the Red Skull, which was even stronger than him at that time, into a serious injury. The whole operation was always very careful and didn't give the Red Skull a chance to overturn. Later, with careful planning, Steve joined the Strategic Science Reserve team and successfully became one of the leading corps of Shendon Bureau. In the hands of the two most powerful secret forces in the world, there are Hydra Advanced Black Technology and Super Soldier Serum and Edelman Alloy in the hands. It can be said that as long as Chen Mo is willing, he has been able to control the development process and direction of the world to a certain extent. Although he has no ambition to rule the world, he has such a powerful power in his hand. At present, there is almost nothing to threaten him. The feeling of doing everything in his power makes his caution and care gradually fade away. Chapter 58. Before Wang Kun's family was tied up, although he noticed the loopholes in his arrangement, he still failed to wake up to the changes in his mentality, including when he later cleaned up the Mafia family. He didn't have much planned preparation and directly broke it. In the eyes of Chen Mo at that time, these Mafia families were just small roles, which were not worth mentioning at all. He was totally in a state of mind of training and even playing without any attention, let alone being cautious. Fortunately, there are no experts in this gang of Mafia, and they are not alert to the arrangement of traps, bombs, sniper guns, and other weapons. Chen Mo's surprise attack on them all night caught them by surprise, and the situation has always been under Chen Mo's control. Otherwise, if you encounter several sharpshooters, or the other party sends spies near the wharf, and they are on guard in advance, arrange snipers or traps, and use Chen Mo's posture to directly lead people to fight hard, you may lose some. Including this time sneaking into the Hydra base, Chen Mo has always been holding a playful mentality, letting Steve go alone to rescue the captives, while he strolled to the control room to have a meeting with Baron Straker, the chess piece he himself laid down. Who would have thought that this chess piece Chen Mo thought he was mastering even gave Chen Mo a slap in the face? Until just now, when the sword stabbed Chen Mo's chest suit, Chen Mo realized in an instant that he had lost himself in this period of time, forgotten his caution when he first came to the world and his calm and steady all the time. It all happened in the light of lightning and firestone. Baron Straker did not know that Chen Mo in front of him suddenly woke up because of the sword he thrust out with all his strength, and recovered to the original calm, prudent, and wise. In fact, it's also simple. Chen Mo is just because his own strength and control power are growing rapidly. His mentality is not adjusted well, and he is in the world of film, lacking the sense of identity in the real world, and he acts more recklessly. Now that he has awakened, Chen Mo's gaze at Baron Straker is naturally different. According to Chen Mo's information, Baron Straker is in Bavaria, Germany. The Baron of Straker Castle began to follow Hitler very early. With his full support, he set up Hydra to develop powerful weapons for the Communist Party, which is regarded as Hitler's loyalty. However, according to Chen Mo, Baron Straker himself also has huge ambitions, and his loyalty to Hitler is only to obtain his strength and support, so as to realize his huge ambitions. He is a powerful master of swordsmanship. Not only that, but also he is proficient in fighting. Chen Mo knew this for a long time, but he didn't pay attention to it. In his opinion, the king's sword in hand, plus 6 times the physical quality and reaction ability of ordinary people, any swordsmanship master in front of him is definitely not his opponent. Moreover, Edelman's alloy armor was on his body, and there was no weapon that could hurt him, so he was too big to hold it until the sharp point of the sword reached his body to dodge. I didn't expect that Baron Straker's swordsmanship was really extraordinary, and his moves changed very quickly. In a moment of carelessness, he was cut into his combat uniform. Right now, Chen Mo's interest is growing. It's hard to meet a swordsman. Chen Mo, who also uses his sword, won't miss the chance to improve his swordsmanship. Eyes watch warily as Baron Straker points straight at him with a stabbing sword. Chen Mo's right hand slowly reaches behind his head, grabs the hilt of the king's sword, and slowly pulls it out. As for the shield, it is not necessary at this time. Baron Straker's eyes are also very dignified at this time. It is needless to say that Chen Mo's powerful force in kicking the iron gate of the control room is also extremely terrible when he just dodged his long sword. You should know that the sword stab just now was already close to the chest, which he believed no one could avoid, because the speed of his long sword is extremely fast. When he is about to stab the target, the speed is too fast to be recognized by the naked eye. If he wants to escape, the speed he needs is not what normal human beings can achieve at all. Even he himself can't hide the sword just now, but the fact is that Chen Mo easily dodged the inevitable sword when he was in a hurry, faster than his sword, which is beyond his imagination. Human, how can it be so fast? However, his next natural and instinctive change has achieved unexpected results. As a master of swordsmanship, he has been immersed in swordsmanship for many years. Baron Straker's swordsmanship skills are very powerful, and the speed and accuracy of sword production are extremely amazing. At the same time, all swordsmanship moves have been integrated into his body and become an instinct. Even if the brain does not respond, the body will naturally respond, quickly use the most correct moves, and attack the enemy's most deadly key points. Chen Mo just didn't expect this. After dodging the stab, he relaxed and was hit by his sudden change of move. The sword of the king is in his hand. Chen Mo's eyes are cold and he looks at Baron Straker in front of him. His strength suddenly bursts out at his feet, and he rushes forward at a very fast speed. At the same time, the long sword in his hand cuts off towards his head from top to bottom. The long and heavy body of the sword cuts through the air, and the silver flash brings a whistling sound of breaking wind. Chen Mo's sword technique has not been systematically studied. He has found it out by himself in the battle. His moves are simple, direct, open, and close. He specializes in the key points of the enemy, which is in the same line with his fighting skills. This is also a manifestation of his unbalanced mentality and arrogance. When he first practiced fighting, he knew that he would learn from the weak and start to build his own car behind closed doors. Although he is good at fighting on the battlefield and killing soldiers, he is a little inferior to a swordsman like Baron Straker. In particular, in order to have a good experience of how powerful his swordsmanship is, Chen Mo deliberately suppressed his strength and speed and kept it at the same level as him, about twice the level of ordinary people. Different from Chen Mo, Baron Straker's swordsmanship focuses on skill and speed, and the long sword used is also a slender stabbing sword. Even if he didn't know that the king's sword was as sharp as mud and iron, he didn't use his sword to take Chen's powerful attack. At the beginning of Chen Mo's launch, Baron Straker, who had been staring at Chen Mo, found his intention. He began to move rapidly at his feet. His steps were flexible, fast, and quirky. Chen Mo could not touch his movements for a while, and the attack of his sword could not help but give a slight pause. Chapter 59. Baron Straker grasped the pause precisely, and the ready-made sword in his hand came out at a high speed, right on the side ridge of the king's sword, close to the point of the sword. The king's sword itself is a long sword of two-handed knights, originally used to fight at once. The length of the blade is nearly 1 meter. Chen Mo holds it in a single hand. Without using all his strength, the long sword is stabbed by Baron Straker's thin sword and turned to one side, completely losing its accuracy. Chen Mo's attack, which was unstoppable at first, was easily diffused, and even his opponent's clothes were not touched. Chen Mo is not surprised but pleased at the defeat. Baron Straker's swordsmanship is much better than he imagined, which also shows that Chen Mo's swordsmanship has a lot of room for improvement. Next, Chen Mo got up and fought with Baron Straker again. Chen Mo's move is wide open and wide closed. His long sword is heavy and sharp. Straker dare not take it hard. He can only avoid its edge and use his footwork to dodge or directly use the sword to deflect it. However, his sword technique is very clever and tricky. He often stabs it from an unexpected angle, forcing Chen Mo to return to the sword lattice and dodge in embarrassment. The small control room became a battlefield for the two. For a while, the figure of the room flashed and the shadow of the sword was heavy. Originally, the person in charge of the base, who was hiding on one side, was frightened by the fierce battle that broke out suddenly between the two people. He squatted on the ground closely against the console, afraid of being cut by the long sword that they kept waving. It's not that he didn't want to escape while they were fighting, but their fighting was too fierce. Their figures kept moving in the whole room, so fast that he couldn't see them clearly, and he didn't know where they would appear next. In this case, how dare he stand out? Maybe he was cut off by a long sword that didn't know where to cut his head before 2 steps. The battle between the two men lasted for a while. On the surface, they seemed to be close to each other, but Chen Mo, with a rigid move, could not completely prevent Baron Straker's tricky and flexible attack without all his strength. His battle suit had been almost scratched, revealing the dark and hard alloy armor inside. Straker's face was not a bit happy. Although most of the attacks were evaded by Chen Mo, just cut his clothes, but several unexpected and tricky attacks actually stabbed Chen Mo. But when he stabbed, the strength of the sword made his heart sink. Through Chen Mo's broken battle suit, he found the dark armor hidden under his clothes. The same shape as the head mask made him quickly understand that it should be a set of special defense armor covering the whole body. After several times of stabbing Chen Mo, it proved his conjecture. In fact, this kind of armor is not completely flawless. There will be a very small gap between the adjacent armor plates, but even with his master swordsmanship's superb swordsmanship, it is difficult to pierce such a small gap in the movement. Needless to say, even if you can stab and successfully break through the defense of bulletproof fiber, you can't stab completely with the body thickness of the stabbing sword. I'm afraid that only a short part of the sword tip can stab into the armor and hurt Chen Mo, which can only be regarded as skin injury at most, and can't constitute a great threat at all. Moreover, with the continuous high-intensity fighting, Straker's physical strength is also a little behind, while Chen Mo's attack has no tendency to weaken at all. After all, Chen Mo can control the strength, speed, suppress the strength, but can't control the physical strength. At the same time, he also made a terrible discovery that Chen Mo's sword technique is becoming stronger and stronger in the process of fighting with him. Although it is not very obvious, he can still feel that Chen Mo's sword technique is improving. Shocked by Chen Mo's horrific learning speed, Baron Straker finally gave up his mind after a long attack. He has no way to deal with Chen Mo. He is like a cold and cunning snake. He has no way to deal with Chen Mo, a powerful and agile turtle. The battle continues. He must have defeated him. Moreover, the self-destruct device of the base has been fully activated by him. In a few minutes the base will be detonated. It's too late to leave. Hundreds of super bombs in the base are not decorations. In my heart, I will give up all my life, even if there is action. After another few moves, Strack stabbed Chen Mo in the left eye, forcing him to return to the sword lattice, but this was a false move. While Chen Mo took back his sword was also taken back. At the same time, his left hand was extended to the base leader crouching behind him. Originally, when Straker intended to escape, he deliberately led Chen Mo to this side in the battle. At this time, both of them were at the innermost side of the control room, and the console of the base was next to them. The base leader who had been ignored was crouching behind Straker. The person in charge of the base, who was close to the console, saw that the two fighting people were getting closer and closer to him, and finally came directly to him. He even had a dead heart. When he cursed the two people in his heart, a big hand came straight to him. Without waiting for his reaction, Straker pulled him up directly with his clothes, and then pushed him to Chen Mo. Chen Mo, who is returning to the sword to block Strack's attack, pays all his attention to the point of the stabbing sword. Strack suddenly draws back his sword. Chen Mo doesn't react for a while. Just as he is about to look up, a figure suddenly pours at him. Before he thought about it, Chen Mo's first reaction was to chop with his sword. The sharp king's sword went directly across his body. From his right shoulder to his left waist, there was a long blood line. The whole body was divided into two parts and fell on both sides of Chen Mo along the momentum. Chen Mo, who had not been able to attack Baron Straker in the battle, couldn't help being puzzled. Looking at him, he found that he was the leader of the base who had been ignored by him all the time. At this time, his upper body just fell on the console. His eyes were wide open. His eyes were full of horror and confusion. When Chen Mo reflected and looked forward again, Baron Straker's figure had already run to the door of the control room. It turned out that he wanted to escape. Chen Mo was not angry that he had been cheated by him. Instead, he raised his mouth slightly with a smile. Baron Straker taught him another lesson. In the battle, we must have a general view of the overall situation and master every detail of the whole scene. When encountering a strong enemy, we should pay more attention to observation. We must not only look at the present but also look at one thing and lose the other. In fact, Chen Mo should not be so easily cheated by him. Chapter 60. At that time, Chen Mo's heart and soul were all above swordsmanship, and he ignored the grasp of the war situation and did not expect that he would use other means than swordsmanship. Only to say, Chen Mo's combat experience was still insufficient, especially the experience of fighting with experts, which was even less. The Red Skull was first seriously injured by his explosion and was shot by a long-distance throwing knife. Even pretending to be dead, he was extremely careful at that time. There was no suspense in the battle. Huang Quan and Han Qing are not inferior to Baron Straker in boxing skills, strength, and speed. However, their duels are not life and death duels, many of which have not been used. Chen Mo has learned a lot of fighting skills, but his experience in life and death duels is limited. As for the other battles, they were all overwhelming massacres. In addition to helping Chen Mo's arrogance, they didn't help him in his fight at this time. Watching Baron Straker escape from the door, Chen Mo did not catch up. In fact, as long as he wanted, he could easily kill Straker with a throwing knife before he rushed out of the door, but Chen Mo came here just to help Steve save the prisoners. Baron Straker is not in a hurry to finish it. In other words, Chen Mo needs him to continue to lead the rebellious Hydra base to finish the play. From the door of the control room, Chen Mo looks back at the monitor screen. At this time, Steve has led a group of captives to break through the interception of Hydra soldiers and directly smashed a section of the wall with a tank, thus withdrawing from the base. The countdown to the base's self-destruction on the console was less than 3 minutes away. The purpose of rescuing the captives has been achieved. I have also made friends with Baron Straker, and I wake up to many things. It's time to evacuate. Although the self-destruct device only detonates the pre-buried explosives, It will not directly detonate the super bombs stored in the factory, but who knows whether these powerful super bombs will be killed in the explosion that will affect the whole base in the near future. With the power of these super bombs, once all of them explode, no one can survive within a few kilometers. Confirm that Steve and others have withdrawn safely. Chenmo will not stop anymore, and his strength will explode completely, and he will jump directly from the railing outside the control room. In the middle, he reached for several times on the railings below and soon fell to the ground. The control room is on the top floor of the base, which is tens of meters high from the ground. Unlike the previous jumping off the plane, it is only tens of meters away from the ground. With Chenmo's current physical quality, he has to buffer several times. After arriving at the ground, Chenmo's rushed out of the base building without stopping. Before the Hydra soldiers on the road could react, Chenmo had already run past them and disappeared at the corner of the corridor. After rushing out of the base building, Chenmo immediately opened up and chased Steve and others in the direction of evacuation. The 9-headed snake soldiers on the outskirts had just been led by Steve and the captured Allied soldiers to launch a ferocious raid, which caused heavy losses without any precautions. This was the time when the spirit was tense. Chenmo's sudden appearance was quickly discovered by the 9-headed snake soldiers around him. Even when many people raised their guns to attack him, Chenmo, relying on the defense of alloy armor, directly ignored these attacks and ran out of the 9-headed snake base without stopping from the gap blasted by Steve and others. Although the speed of his full burst is extremely amazing, it is difficult to be targeted and locked, but there are many bullets like rain behind him hitting him. After fighting with Baron Straker, his tattered battle suit was completely broken into rags, which was directly blown down by the strong wind of high-speed running, revealing the dark alloy armor battle suit inside. Chenmo, whose hard armor covers his whole body, looks more like a powerful humanoid iron and steel machine at this time. With his superhuman speed and strong defense against bullets, the Hydra soldiers in the rear can't help doubting whether they are fighting with a non-human being. In a moment of hesitation, the fire in his hands could not help Emil. When they got back to their senses, Chenmo had already rushed out of the collapsed wall and soon disappeared into the night. Chen and Steve have been away for 3 days from the Italian front camp. As they were behind the enemy, they could not communicate at all, so for the outside world, they had lost contact for 3 days. The American captain, who was supposed to continue his tour of the front lines and barracks, disappeared and was said to have gone deep into the enemy's rear to rescue the captives. This irritated Senator Brand, who valued Steve's propaganda value and kept putting pressure on Colonel Phillips to try to rescue him. In the face of the stormy Senator Brand, Colonel Phillips seemed remarkably calm. Steve has no worries about his safety. Chenmo's strength is well known to him. His previous record of killing Hydra base is also there. Colonel Phillips has no doubt about their success in this operation, so in the face of Senator Brand's constant pressure, Colonel Phillips just managed to send several reconnaissance aircraft to investigate, without further action. He has 100% confidence in Chenmo. Just now, Colonel Phillips received another call from Senator Brand, claiming that if Steve did have an accident, he would launch Congress and close the Strategic Science Reserve. Senator Brand is a veteran of the U.S. Senate who has great power and influence in the United States. He has a voice in Congress. He said that closing the Strategic Science Reserve team is more than just saying. Steve is very important to him. He has accumulated political capital. He is the key to running for president. Once there is an accident in Colonel Phillips's hands, he will never give up. Of course, the present Strategic Science Reserve team cannot be needed by everyone, not to mention the hidden power, but the outstanding achievements of eliminating several bases of Hydra and helping the Allied forces to open up the situation in many places cannot be easily wiped out. And the Strategic Science Reserve is a coalition of allies. Although it is led by the United States, Senator Brad has to pay a lot to shut him down. Colonel Phillips, who was non-committal about his threat, hung up and shrugged at Agent Carter at his desk. He said that if we don't get Steve back, we'll close the door. At this point, the colonel looked at Carter with a jest on his face. It seems that our big star is also a big man. Carter couldn't help laughing.